Okay, Torah portion, Shoftim then. It's an interesting Torah portion. This is kind of the theme that we're going to see throughout it is going to be that of leadership. And I want to look at the idea of leadership and what it is to make judgments and decisions on behalf of YHVH. And the principles that he gives us to do those things, because I think that kind of largely in the Torah movement, people have a desire to go back to the ancient paths and to do things as they used to be done, but they've kind of lost how that should be, and they've taken things from the way that the church was and things that they didn't like from how the church was, and now they're kind of trying to mash all of these things together, and they don't really understand what it should look like. So I want to look at that. And the first part, just to start with, I'm going to look at some stuff to do with keeping the feasts, which is stuff that we've not looked at before, and kind of changes some of the instructions that were given for how to keep these things. Then in the second part, I'm going to look at a narrative within Scripture from 2 Samuel. And something that Charlie mentioned the other day that he'd been reading. He was discussing what he'd seen, and I thought, wow, I need to go back and read that piece of Scripture. So I'm going to spend the second part reading over that and looking at how all of these themes are right there within it, how it looks at rulership from the human perspective, and then how we can see how Messiah will judge his people and how he leads his people from the situation that we're given there. And in the second part, I want to look at kings and what kings were restricted from doing, and why, and what it is to rely on certain things, what it is to rely on money, and what it is to rely on his name instead, and just the issues that are brought up from that. Well, the first verse we need to look at is Deuteronomy 16:8, because that's going to contain some new information in. But just to set the context of what's actually happening here, because we can dive right into the verses and be like, well, this is what is said. We can take information from it. But we need to recognize what's happening. Moshe is giving one of 3 or 4 speeches, depending on how you divide those things up, to the people who are just about to go into the land. So this is who he's speaking to, and this is what he says to them. He says, 6 days you eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there is a closing festival. Now you might have heard that translated as a solemn assembly. Okay, if you've read of the solemn assembly in Scripture and ever wondered what it is, that's what I'm going to look at. So it's a solemn assembly or a closing festival to YHVH your Elohim. You do no work. So the word is atzara. So we need to understand what an atzara actually is, because how do we follow this? How do we take this as instruction in righteousness if we don't know what the words mean? Okay, so this is atzara, assembly, solemn assembly. It's not really what it's saying. If it's just saying this is an assembly, it's already said about this day, the 7th day of unleavened bread. It's already said this is a mikra. Okay, this is a holy convocation. We know that the word mikra is from the word kara, the verb kara, to call. So a mikra is people being called together. It's an invitation, basically. It's a calling together of his people. So these days are mikra. But there are some days, or a couple of days within them, that are actually atzara as well. Okay, so assembly, solemn assembly, just like understanding the word mikra, we need to understand that it comes from the verb kara, to call together. We need to understand this comes from a verb as well. It comes from the verb atzar. Okay, this is the verb atzar, to restrain, retain, close up, shut up. When you hear like they shut up the heavens, YHVH shut up the heavens, this is the word that's used. Withhold, refrain, stay, detain. Okay, so this is what the verb means. Now this is Gesenius's Hebrew Chaldee lexicon on the word atzara. And I'm not going to read through it, but what I want you to take is that there is scholarly debate as to what this word actually means. Okay, some people are saying it just means an assembling together, which I would say it can't mean from the context. Some people saying that the restraint that's on the day is not being able to work. Okay, it's an atzarah, you do no work. Well, that doesn't work, because sometimes it says it's a mikra, you do no work. The idea of doing no work on it isn't the restraint that's on the day. Okay, so this is Gesenius's lexicon on the word atzar, the actual root word. Okay, to shut. The primary idea is that of surrounding or enclosing, to hold back or to detain, to restrain by rule, to be restrained or hindered, to be gathered together from the idea of restraining or compelling. Okay, so this is what this day is, and it's all to do with this verb. Now, I'm going to go through the scriptures when this word is used, other than the ones that we've seen, because it's not used all that often. We can read all of the scriptures that it's used in. And what this word means, as we'll see, is it's a day upon which you are compelled to meet together. Okay, the kara, the mikra, is a day on which you are called or invited to meet together. So the Shabbat is a mikra. Okay, some days though you're called to meet together, but you are compelled to meet on those days as well. Leviticus 23 verse 8 describes this same day, the seventh day of unleavened bread. It says, "And you shall bring an offering made by fire to Yehovah for 7 days. On the seventh day is a mikra, you do no servile work." So doing no servile work, not to do with the atzarah, but it's also a mikra. So we're called to meet together on that day, but it's also described as a day upon which we must meet together. Joel 1 verse 14 says, "Set apart a fast, call an atzarah," okay? "Gather the elders, all the inhabitants of the land, all of them into the house of Yehovah your Elohim, and cry out to Yehovah." Okay, so this is a response to something which they need to do. Call an atzarah, get everyone together. Joel 2, 15-16, "Blow a ram's horn in Sion, set apart a fast, call an atzarah. Gather the people, assemble the elders, gather the children and nursing babes. Let a bridegroom come out of his room, and a bride from her dressing room." Everyone, doesn't matter what they're doing. Okay, everybody has to go there. Okay, if that's anyone online texting me, I can't read the text at the moment. So anybody that is called to one of these atzarah must attend them. Okay, it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You could be getting married, and we're going to see in some verses later that getting married is something that Yehovah excuses people from having to do other things for. So for an atzarah, everyone has to be there. 2 Kings 10 verse 20 says, "And Jehu said, set apart an atzarah for Baal." So they proclaimed it. So it's not just for Yehovah that you can have an atzarah. An atzarah is this mandatory gathering. "And Jehu sent throughout all Israel, all the servants of Baal came, so that there was not a man left who did not come. And they came into the house of Baal, and it was filled from end to end." So that's everyone. Okay, everyone attended. In Jeremiah 9 verse 2, we see a very interesting use of this word. It's used in a way to emphasize just how bad Israel are. It says, "Oh, that I had in the wilderness a lodging place for wayfaring men, and I would leave my people and go from them, for they are all adulterers and atzarah of treacherous men." Okay, so it's used here to emphasize all of the treacherous men are there in Israel. That's how bad they are. They're an atzarah of treacherous men. So the first day of unleavened bread is a mikra. The last day of unleavened bread is a mikra, but it's also an atzarah. So it's a day that you must meet together. Leviticus 23, 35-36 says, "On the first day is a set apart mikra. You do no servile work." This is talking about Sukkot now. So the first day of Sukkot is a mikra. "For 7 days you bring an offering made by fire to Yehovah. On the 8th day, there shall be a set apart gathering for you, a mikra, and you shall bring an offering made by fire. It is an atzerah. Okay, so they're both mikras, but on one day you are compelled to meet together. Everyone has to be there. So on the 8th day of Sukkot, everyone must be there. 6 days you eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there's a closing festival to Yehovah, an atzerah to Yehovah. You do no work. Count 7 weeks for yourself. Begin to count 7 weeks from the time you begin to put the sickle to the grain. Okay, this instruction, count 7 weeks, we see with a bit more information in Leviticus 23. From the morrow after the Sabbath. Okay, so during unleavened bread, you've got the 7 days of unleavened bread. In any 7-day period, there's going to be a Sabbath. From the day after the Sabbath, which will be the first day of the week, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, so it's the Feast of First Fruits, is the day after the Sabbath, you shall count for yourselves 7 tamim Sabbaths, 7 completed Sabbaths. So they're the 7 weeks. From that first day to the first Shabbat, 7 days, okay? And onwards to 49 days, and then the day after is the Feast of Shavuot. This is the Feast of Shavuot that it details here. And you shall perform the festival of weeks to Yehovah your Elohim, according to the voluntary offering from your hand, which you give as Yehovah your Elohim blesses you. Now this is a concept that we're going to see as we go through this. The voluntary offerings, okay, they brought various voluntary offerings. They brought the mincha offering, the peace offerings were voluntary offerings, burnt offerings could be voluntary offerings, but they were to give them as Yehovah blessed them. So in accordance with the blessings that they'd received, they were what they were to give. And you shall rejoice before Yehovah your Elohim, you and your son and your daughter and your male servant, your female servant, the Levi who is within your gates, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow who are in your midst, at the place where Yehovah your Elohim chooses to make his name dwell. And we looked at how that was accommodated last week in the tithe. So for 7 years, the people would go up. In the 3rd year, the tithe would be used to allow the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow to also go up. So in that 7-year period, all of these people that are detailed here would go up and they would eat before Yehovah. The Torah was also read 1 out of 7 years, and I would imagine that they would have done it on the year that everyone went up to the feast. I don't know that for a fact, but that's how I'd imagine that you'd do it. And you shall remember that you were a slave in Mitzrayim, and you shall guard to do these laws. So that's what all of the festivals were. Whether they're specifically said, you know, when you go and you camp in tents, you're doing it to remember when they came out of Mitzrayim, or not, okay? It says you do all of these things to remember that you were a slave in Mitzrayim. And for us, we remember that we were a slave to sin. And now we've been set free to this life that we live now, and we're called to these things. And we go and we celebrate and we rejoice before Yehovah in all of the blessings that he brings in our lives. Perform the festival of booths for 7 days after the ingathering of the threshing floor and from your wine press. Okay, and that's again how we know that it's after the equinox that these things were done. Okay, you've got the Feast of First Fruits when the barley was ripe. This was done after the ingathering. And in order to gather in, or in order for things to be ripe, the equinox must have been. And you shall rejoice in your festival, you and your son and your daughter and your male servant, your female servant, and the Levite and the stranger and the fatherless and the widow who are within your gates. For 7 days you shall observe a festival to Yehovah your Elohim in the place which Yehovah chooses, because Yehovah your Elohim does bless you in all your increase and all the work of your hands, and you shall be only rejoicing. 3 times a year, all your males appear before Yehovah your Elohim in the place which he chooses, at the festival of unleavened bread, festival of weeks, and the festival of booths or Sukkot. And none should appear before Yehovah empty-handed. That's an interesting thing for it to say. None should appear before Yehovah empty-handed. It's not, you shall not appear before Yehovah empty-handed. The entire context of this is you do it in accordance with how Yehovah blesses you. And he's basically saying, look, if you've been doing the commandments, if you've been walking righteously, then you shouldn't appear before him empty-handed. And we can see that from the next verse. It says, but each one with the gift of his hand according to the blessing of Yehovah your Elohim, which he's given you. Just like when it says there should be no poor in the land. And then it goes on and says, and when there is poor in the land, because he knows what they're going to do. Appoint judges and officers, okay, Shoftim and Shoftim, within all your gates, which Yehovah your Elohim is giving you, according to your tribes, and they shall judge the people with righteous judgment. Okay, so this word here, Shoftim, is the plural of this word here, shafat. And shafat's a weird word in Hebrew, because shafat is actually a verb. Usually you would get the name for someone like a judge. You get that from the verb, but it would be a different word. It would be a noun. Here, somebody who judges is called by the verb a judge. That's shafat. The plural of that is shoftim. And what they're to judge according to is mishpat, from the same word. Just like mikra is from kara, mishpat is from the verb to judge. So what it is righteous justice, just judgment, right ruling. There's loads of different translations, but it's basically Yehovah's system of justice. What it's saying is that these people are to judge things according to how Yehovah would judge things. And there's the judges and there's the officers as well. And we'll see more about these groups of people. In 1 Chronicles 23, 2-4, it says, and he gathered all the rulers of Israel with the priests and the Levites. And the Levites were numbered from the age of 30 years old and above, and their number head by head was 38,000 males. Of these, 24,000 were to oversee the work of the house of Yehovah. 6,000 were officers and judges, okay? Shotarim and Shoftim. So the ones that David chose, and the ones that we see, in fact, all the way through the scriptures, primarily, not the only people who could be, but primarily the people who were judging were the Levites, so the priests. They were the people who knew the Torah. Because one of the things that we're going to look at is the idea that the people didn't have their own copy of the Torah. In the system that Yehovah set up, he set up the teachers of the law to be living among Israel, to teach the law to them, and the priests also to know the law. So who is it that you would go to judge with mishpat, to know the law of Elohim? It would be the Levites who were the judges. And that's what we see throughout the scriptures. Deuteronomy 19, 16-18 says, when a malicious witness rises up against any man to accuse him of turning aside, then both men who have the dispute shall stand before Yehovah, before the priests and the judges who serve in those days. Again, who are you going to go to? Who actually knows the Torah? Okay, in the system that Yehovah set up. And the Shoftim shall diligently search and see if the witness is a false witness, who has falsely accused his brother. And we're going to get into these issues, how it is that Yehovah wants strife, contention about either party to party or things that are in the word. How is it that he wants these things dealt with? And something I want to introduce as an idea is that these people are human beings, okay? They're fallible. They're not guaranteed to make the absolute right judgment in every case. But that was not required. All it was required was Yehovah had set these people up and said, I've appointed these people and they're going to judge according to the word. There was no guarantee that they would always be right, but that's what Yehovah instituted. Exodus 5 verse 6 says, and the same day Pharaoh commanded the slave drivers of the people and their foremen. What I want you to recognize is this is the same word. Okay, we think, oh yeah, the foreman in Egypt. It's the same word, the same Hebrew word, shotarim. Deuteronomy 1 verse 15 says, "And I took the heads of your tribes, wise men and known, and made them heads over you, leaders of thousands, leaders of hundreds, leaders of 50s, leaders of 10s, and Shoftim for your tribes." And these were the people who were involved, the leadership within the tribes who would make these judgments over the people. Joshua 1, 10 to 11 says, "And Yehoshua commanded the officers, the Shoftim of the people, and he said, pass through the midst of the camp and command the people, saying, prepare food for yourselves." So if you can imagine that Moshe was receiving these instructions from Yehovah, and then he was relaying them to the people. There were 6 million men who were there, never mind the women and children. Okay, he would have needed help in telling people. You think about the actual logistics of how he would have done that. "So appoint judges and officers within all your gates, which Yehovah your Elohim is giving you, according to your tribes, and they shall shafat the people with righteous mishpat. Do not distort mishpat. Do not show partiality, nor take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the righteous." Another reason why it would be good, like in my eyes, me looking at the situation, for the Levites to be the judges, because the Levites would not have had any business association with any of their brothers or anything like that. So they would have no skin in the game, so to speak. "Follow righteousness alone, so that you live and inherit the land which Yehovah your Elohim is giving you." But basically what's being told to them is, you will judge these matters as if you are Yehovah. Okay, from his word, from his principles, that is how you judge these matters. "Do not plant for yourself any tree as an Asherah near the altar of Yehovah your Elohim that you make for yourself." Now this is interesting when we think about what Paul said about eating meat sacrificed to idols. Okay, "Do not plant for yourself any tree as an Asherah." Is it a problem to plant a tree? No, of course. Is it a problem to plant a tree as an Asherah? Of course it is. Okay, the tree isn't the problem. The problem is what's in your mind when you plant the tree. 1 Corinthians 8 verse 7, Paul says, "However, not all have this knowledge, but some, being aware of the idol, until now eat it as having been offered to an idol." Okay, "Do not plant any tree as an Asherah." So their conscience being weak is defiled. So he acknowledges that it's wrong to eat something as having been offered to an idol. Just like it would be wrong to plant a group of trees if you were going to go and worship a false god in them. You want to go and plant a group of trees though? Not a problem. Let's say you plant a group of trees, okay? Let's say that you come into an inheritance of a group of trees. And it's a group of trees that people have previously used to go and worship false gods in. Would it be good for you as a believer to have that grove of trees in a land where people associated it with pagan practices? Well, of course it wouldn't, because they'd all think, what's JP doing with the grove of trees? You know, that's really not on. So what Paul's getting across is that it would be lawful for me to have a load of trees. That wouldn't break the Torah. What would not be profitable, however, would be to have them if people's consciences were going to be defiled by seeing me with the group of trees that they thought that I worshipped false gods in, because they don't have that knowledge. 1 Corinthians 10 verse 23, "All is permitted me, but not all do profit." Otherwise, there's going to be things that are permitted according to the Torah that still might not be a good idea to do. Revelation 2 verse 20 says, "But I hold against you that you allow that woman Isabel, who calls herself a prophetess, to teach and lead my servants astray." And this is a verse that people confuse, and they say, well, this is what Paul's doing. Okay, because listen what this woman is teaching and leading his servants astray in. To commit whoring and to eat food offered to idols. Word food's not there, just to eat what's offered to idols, basically. Okay, so people will say, well, this is what Paul is doing. He's teaching people to eat food offered to idols. But we need to read this carefully to see what's actually being said here. Paul isn't teaching people to commit whoring and eat food offered to idols. If you are committing whoring with the idol and eating food offered to it, then you're eating that food as food or meat offered to an idol. That's not what Paul says. Paul says, therefore, my beloved ones, flee from idolatry. And then he says, no, but what the Gentiles offer, they offer to demons and not to Elohim. And I do not wish you to become sharers with demons. You're not able to drink the cup of the master and the cup of demons. You're not able to partake of the table of the master and of the table of demons. Do we provoke the master to jealousy, this whoring, this fornication with false gods? That's what Yeshua is saying is a problem. Being aware of the idol, that's the problem. Eating it as having been offered to an idol. He says that that's wrong, and that's exactly what Yeshua says is wrong. Committing whoring or fornication, eating it as food offered to an idol. Yeshua and Paul are in exact agreement on that point. So do not plant for yourself any tree as an Asherah. Plant trees, that's fine, just don't do them as Asherahs. Near the altar of YHVH your Elohim that you make for yourself. Do not set up a matzevah, which YHVH your Elohim hates. Now this is an interesting command to have in proximity to this one, because we know when we went through Genesis, we saw YHVH says, I'm the ale of Bethel where you anointed the matzevah. Yaakov anointed the matzevah to YHVH and says, do not set up a matzevah, which YHVH hates. But here we have YHVH, and he's possibly associating himself with it. Now this could be a couple of different things. Okay, it could be just like what Paul is saying, and do not set up a tree as an Atzerah. Do not set this up, a pillar of this type, as a matzevah, okay, as something which has this pagan context. It could be that this is what's going on here. Could also be just YHVH's grace. Okay, we know that the law was added because of transgressions. We know that the patriarchs did a load of things that really weren't good, and that the law legislates against afterwards. So it could be either. But I think it's interesting that it appears in this context. Okay, do not plant for yourself any tree as an Asherah near the altar of YHVH your Elohim, because as Charlie's looked at when he looked at syncretism, this mixing of worship, what they were doing is they were taking these ways of worshipping the pagan gods, and then they were worshipping YHVH through them, and they were mixing his name with the name of Baal. Do not set up a matzevah, which YHVH your Elohim hates. Do not sacrifice to YHVH your Elohim a bull or sheep which has any blemish, any evil matter, for that is an abomination to YHVH your Elohim. This all seems to be of the sort of things which are worshipping YHVH in a way that is not legal according to Torah. When there is found in your midst, in any of your cities which YHVH your Elohim is giving you, a man or woman who does whatever is evil in the eyes of YHVH your Elohim, in transgressing his covenant. And this is an interesting statement to me as well. I definitely subscribe to the idea of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil as being when man departed from a kind of a truth and falsity view of good and evil. YHVH has said that this is evil, so it's evil. When they ate of the tree, they began to decide for themselves what good and evil was. Eve saw the fruit, that it was good. Okay, so she decides that she's going to take of this fruit and eat it. So YHVH said that it's evil. Man now decides that it's good. So I subscribe to that. So the idea that we have throughout Torah is someone who does what is evil in the eyes of YHVH, because that is what is evil. And has gone and served other gods and bowed down to them, or to the sun or the moon or any of the host of the heavens, which I have not commanded. And it has been made known to you, and you have heard and have searched diligently. Then see, if true, this matter is confirmed, that such an abomination has been done in Israel. Okay, so the people who were diligently searching in these cases, as we saw before and we'll see later, with the judges. They would diligently search to see if it was true. Then you shall bring out to your gates that man or woman who has done this evil matter, and you shall stone to death that man or woman with stones. At the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall he that is to die be put to death. He is not to be put to death by the mouth of 1 witness. The hand of the witnesses shall be first against him to put him to death, and the hand of all the people last. So you shall purge the evil from your midst. And there are many things that people misunderstand about the death penalty in Torah, but this contains a couple of really important ones. Okay, so if you were going to accuse somebody of something and it was going to carry the death penalty, you couldn't be the only witness. There had to be more than 1 witness. The hand of the witnesses were to be first against them. So people, when they deal with the death penalty, when people say things about the death penalty, they'll say, well, what about when a false accusation is brought? Okay, if you just bring these people out, false accusation, and then you've got the death penalty, that's pretty permanent. If you were going to do that, you couldn't just go to the police station and say, this person's done this thing worthy of death, and then the police go around and arrest them, and then they go to the judges, and then the judges deal with them, and then they're finally put to death. Okay, because there's a great distance there, isn't there, between you and the actual carrying out of the punishment. If you were going to accuse somebody of something, you knew that it carried the death penalty. You knew that you were going to be the first one with a stone in your hand, smashing them in the face, killing these people. Okay, and not only you, but all of the other people who would come forth as witnesses against them. It's kind of a great deterrent to people. You know, you've actually got to think about what's going to be carried out here. So at the mouth of 1 witness, false witness, you know, maybe someone hates somebody, can't be done. 2 or 3 witnesses who are all prepared to pick up stones and kill the person. It says, you shall not let your eye pity somebody. If you know that they're guilty, don't let your eye pity them, because that's human nature, isn't it? You don't want to go out and kill somebody, but you do not let your eye pity them. But as for a false accusation being brought, it's a lot less likely. So I want to look at the offenses for which the death penalty is enacted, because if we're going to understand YHVH, we're going to understand who he is, and we're going to understand what justice is in his eyes, this is something that we really need to come face to face with. Genesis 9 verse 6, okay, the first time death penalty is instituted when Noah comes out the ark. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood is shed. Okay, so for murder, death penalty. For in the image of Elohim has he made the man. Leviticus 27:28-29 says, however, whatever a man lays under ban for YHVH, this is to devote something to destruction. YHVH says these certain things should be devoted to destruction when you go in. I want you to kill these people, and I want you to destroy all of the things that they have. Of all that he has, man and beast, or the field of his possession, is not sold or redeemed. Whatever is laid under ban is most set apart to YHVH. And once it's set apart to YHVH, when something is holy to him, then you can't touch it, and you can't deal with it as yours anymore. No one under the ban among men is ransomed, but shall certainly be put to death. Okay, so if it was just stuff, if it was sheep or goats or whatever, then you could pay a certain price, and then it would be taken out from being devoted to destruction. But if it was a man, they're certainly to be put to death. And it's interesting how YHVH tells us that we're to view these things that have been put under the ban. You do not bring an abomination into your house, or you have been utterly devoted like it. You do utterly loathe it and utterly hate it because it's devoted. Okay, so we're to take the way that we view things in the world, and we're to conform them to how YHVH views things, which is why it's so important to look at his mishpat, which is why it says your eye shall not pity these people, because we are to, we're prone to being pitying towards people, to being tolerant towards people. You see it all throughout society now, extreme tolerance. Well, YHVH says, you utterly loathe these things and you utterly hate them. I have devoted them to destruction. What do you think that means about this thing? Do you think you're to then take it into your house and say, oh no, this gold and silver, I quite like gold and silver, I'll have it. That's exactly what Achan did in the book of Joshua. Deuteronomy 13 verse 5 says, and that prophet or that dreamer of dreams is put to death because he's spoken apostasy against Yehovah your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, redeemed you from the house of bondage, to make you stray from the way in which Yehovah your Elohim commanded you to walk. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. And it's exactly the same with these things. This is something that has been devoted to destruction. We're very kind of prone to saying, oh, you know, what they're saying is trying to lead people away from following the commands of Yehovah, but, you know, maybe we should be tolerant of it. Maybe we should allow, maybe they'll change. Maybe if we pray for them, Yehovah will open their eyes and they'll be, no. Purge the evil from your midst. Get rid of it. You shall utterly loathe it and hate it because it's been devoted to destruction. See these things as Yehovah sees them. The prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name which I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other gods, even that prophet shall die. People are so ready to say, oh, this is what Yehovah said, or Yehovah said this to me, or he showed me this, or he showed me that. We're to be extremely, extremely careful over what we say. We should not presume to speak on Yehovah's behalf, always with a caveat, you know, maybe, I think maybe he's shown me this, I'm not sure, you know, whatever, but we don't presume to speak in his name and on his behalf. It carries the death penalty. A man or woman in whom there is a medium or who are spiritists shall certainly be put to death. They are to stone them with stones, their blood is upon them. This is another component of it. Okay, the land was defiled by any blood that was shed upon it. And if someone sheds blood, then by man, their blood has to be shed. But in cases like this, where the death penalty is instituted, their blood is upon them. They're the ones who bear the guilt for it. Do not allow a practicer of witchcraft to live. So all of these spiritual practices, all of these means of finding out information from the spirit realm, we're to go to Yehovah instead for these things. So if anyone comes along and they're trying to tell you that Yehovah says differently, that he's got a different message, or they're trying to lead you away to stray from the way in which he'd have you to walk, they're to be put to death. If mediums, spiritists, people who practice witchcraft, all of them are deserving of death to Yehovah. Work is done for 6 days, but on the seventh day it shall be set apart to you, a Sabbath of rest to Yehovah. Anyone doing work on it is put to death. This is how he would have the human beings that are on the earth institute justice for him. Okay, so for the death penalty to be carried out, it would be the judges that carried it out. But if people escape this because we don't have this on the earth now, what do you think is going to happen when they stand before Yehovah and they're either going to receive eternal life or the second death? This is how Yehovah will judge things. Okay, anyone doing work on the Sabbath day is put to death. We can think, oh, I'll escape it. I'll escape it because, you know, what's he going to do to me? You know, he's going to strike me dead? No, I've just gone and I've worked. And there was no consequence to it. People forget that this is how Yehovah views things. Work on the Sabbath day, it's deserving of death. When the dwelling place is to go forward, the tabernacle, the Levites take it down, the Levites set it up. The stranger who comes near is to be put to death. Okay, so the stranger, as we've looked at before, is anyone who's not a Levite in this case. Anyone for whom it would be illegal to do these things. They're put to death. This is the dwelling place of Yehovah. It cannot be defiled. Appoint Aharon and his sons, and they shall guard their priesthood. The stranger who comes near shall be put to death. So in this case, even if it's a Levite, anyone other than Aaron and his sons who comes near to these holy objects, holy to Yehovah, really doesn't get what's going on, they're to be put to death. They cannot come near and defile the dwelling place of Yehovah. When a man is found lying with a woman married to a husband, then both of them shall die. Both the man that lay with the woman and the woman, thus you purge the evil from Israel. People, it just baffles me that people look at things like this and they think, I'm glad that we don't follow the God of the Old Testament anymore. And I look at the world and I think, really? Are you? You glad that that's not a standard that we've got anymore? That it's just not okay to do that on pain of death? When a girl who is a maiden is engaged to a husband, and a man finds her in the city and lies with her, then you shall bring them both out to the gate of that city. So you bring them to these Shoftim and Shoftim, to the priests, and shall stone them to death with stones. The girl because she did not cry out in the city, and the man because he's humbled his neighbor's wife. Okay, so you find some people sleeping together. The girl says that she was raped. Well, if she's in the city and there were people around to have heard, then probably not. Okay, but if a man finds the girl who is engaged in the field and the man seizes her and lies with her, he rapes her, then only the man who lay with her shall die, but you do no matter to the girl. The girl has no sin worthy of death. And that's something for us to reckon with, that these sins are worthy of death. These people who do these things are worthy of death. And they're as worthy of death today as they were when YHVH instituted them, including breaking the Shabbat. For the matter is like a man who rises against his neighbor and kills him. Okay, so like a man would kill somebody else, that's how this man has acted to the girl in seizing her and raping her. For he found her in the field and she cried out, the engaged girl, but without anyone to save her. When any man takes a wife and shall go into her and shall hate her and shall make abusive charges against her and bring an evil name on her and say, I took this woman and when I came to her, I did not find her a maiden. So people get this command all backwards. What they think it's about is that a man has the right to accuse somebody of not being a virgin, and if he can do that and her parents can't bring out any proof that she was a virgin, then she's to be stoned to death. I want you to notice what this is saying. Who is the person that is being addressed in this? A man that takes a wife, goes into her and hates her. He makes abusive charges against her, brings an evil name on her. Okay? It's about the man and the man bringing the false charges. Then the father and the mother of the young woman shall take and bring out the proof of the girl's maidenhood, virginity, to the elders of the city at the gate. So, if somebody's done this, they brought an evil name upon somebody, then the matter that it's taken before the judges is the girl's parents going to prove that this is not the case. It's not something that has to be proven, but if they can prove it, and they can prove that he's guilty, then the following happens. The girl's father shall say to the elders, I gave my daughter to this man as wife, and he hates her. And see, he has made abusive charges against her, saying, I did not find your daughter a maiden, and yet these are the proofs of my daughter's maidenhood. And they shall spread the garment before the elders of the city. Okay, again, it's not required of them if these charges have been brought. It's only required of them if they wish this man to be punished. And the elders of that city shall take that man and punish him. It's all about the fella. Find him 100 pieces of silver, give them to the father of the young woman, because he has brought an evil name on a maiden of Israel, and she is to be his wife, and he is not allowed to put her away all his days. What, so she's got to be his wife forever after he's slagged her off? That's not what it says, is it? Okay. Women could put men away too. Yeshua speaks of women putting men away. What it's saying is, he is not allowed, on the basis of these false charges, to put her away as his wife. But if the matter is true, that the girl was not found a maiden, in the case that they've brought this case against the man, and it's turned out that she wasn't actually a virgin, then they shall bring the girl out to the door of her father's house, and the men of her city shall stone her to death with stones, because she's done wickedness in Israel to whore in her father's house. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. Remember what was necessary to do this. Not at the mouth of one witness. Okay, the fella couldn't bring this against her. At the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses who said that this girl was not a virgin, after these people have brought a case against the man, and it's been found to not be true, This is the penalty. Okay, so don't bring cases against people and say, oh yeah, we're just going to bring it against them because maybe it'll be found that he slandered her and then that'll be better for her. No, if you know that that's actually the case, don't bring the case against him, because maybe then your daughter's going to be brought out and stoned. But again, there's a very, very high standard that's necessary to prove these things. Leviticus 20 verse 14 says, a man who marries a woman and her mother, it is wickedness. They are burned with fire, both he and they, that there be no wickedness in your midst. Okay, there's only a couple of offenses which carry this penalty of being burned with fire. But what would it actually do? What would this command actually bring about in the society? Is there going to be anybody who's marrying a woman and her daughter and her mother? Okay. Is there going to be anybody? If you know that this is the penalty, are there even going to be any marriages taking place in the first place? Of course there aren't. It's not about burning people with fire. It's about establishing a standard of righteousness. And a man who has intercourse with a beast, he shall certainly be put to death, and the beast you kill. And a woman who approaches any beast and mates with it, you shall kill the woman and the beast. They shall certainly be put to death. Their blood is upon them. Again, okay, seems fair enough to me. I mean, I don't know what effect it has on an animal if you have intercourse with it, but obviously Yehovah, who knows all of these things, says the animal too must be killed. A man who lies with his uncle's wife. Okay, so a man who marries a woman and her mother. This is different, okay, of course. A man who lies with his uncle's wife, he's uncovered his uncle's nakedness, and they bear their sin. They die childless. A man who takes his brother's wife, it is uncleanness. He has uncovered his brother's nakedness. They die childless. Okay, so we can see that Yehovah's got this sliding scale of what is just in all of these cases. It's another great example of where Paul takes the idea that the Torah applies to somebody while they're alive from. Because after someone has died, the Torah mandates, or doesn't mandate, it says that you can take your brother's wife after that point, that he is to take the wife into the household. However, while he's alive, he can't do that. So we can take from that the Torah is only in effect over somebody as long as they are alive. Leviticus 20 verse 17, and a man who takes his sister, his father's daughter, or his mother's daughter, and sees her nakedness, and she sees his nakedness, it's wickedness, and they shall be cut off from before the eyes of their people. And it's actually, we can't actually tell what this means. Does it mean that they are to die? I would say that probably, given the relationships involved and the rest of the context, it probably does. But often this being cut off means to be isolated, or to be shunned, or whatever the word is, to be exiled from the community, and can mean both in the scriptures. Leviticus 18, 21 to 22 says, and do not give any of your offspring to pass through to Moloch, and do not profane the name of your Elohim. I am Yehovah. Do not lie with a male as with a woman. It is an abomination. So these two things follow one on from another. And it says, for whoever does any of these abominations, those souls who do them shall be cut off from among the people. So both of these things, again, I would suggest that it's probably the death penalty in this case too. Letting your offspring pass through to Moloch, which would be to burn them alive. And lying with a male as with a woman, it's an abomination. If you do them, you're cut off from the people. Leviticus 21 verse 9 says, and when the daughter of any priest profanes herself by whoring, she profanes her father, and she's burned with fire. Okay, one of the few, or the couple that there are of these offenses. But again, what's the result going to be? Is it going to be that on every street corner there is pyres with daughters burning? Of course not. It's just going to be that none of this sort of nonsense happens. Exodus 21, 28 to 29 says, when an ox gores a man or a woman to death, then the ox shall certainly be stoned, and its flesh is not eaten. And the owner of the ox is innocent. You've got an ox that happens to kill somebody, not your fault. However, if the ox was previously in the habit of goring and its owner has been warned, he's not kept it confined so that it's killed a man or a woman, the ox is stoned and its owner also is put to death. Fair enough, isn't it? You've been warned that your ox might kill somebody. You don't do anything about it. It kills somebody. You are to blame. Exodus 21:15-17. He who smites his father or his mother shall certainly be put to death. He who kidnaps a man and sells him, or if he's found in his hand, shall certainly be put to death. Many people love to say that the Bible says that slavery is fine. Okay? And the concept that they have of slavery is this. Okay? Taking somebody by force and selling them. Slavery in the Bible was quite simply when somebody was too poor to sustain themselves, that they could sell themselves into somebody's service, and that would be for the period of 7 years. And in the 7th year, they would be let free with enough stuff to go on and establish a life for themselves. Slavery, as we know it, is forbidden. And he who curses his father or mother shall certainly be put to death. And again, we've got to remember when we look at these things, that these are people that YHVH says are worthy of death. Right now, anyone who does any of these things in YHVH's eyes are worthy of death. Okay? Cursing your father or mother is worthy of death. Deuteronomy 21:18-21 says, when a man has a wayward and rebellious son who is not listening to the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and who when they have disciplined him does not listen to them, then his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his city, to the gate of his city, and shall say to the elders of his city, this son of ours is wayward and rebellious. He's not listening to our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of his city shall stone him to death with stones. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. Let all Israel hear and fear. So this is the purpose of it, so that everybody knows. Okay, don't be doing that, because this is the result. Obviously not a young child, a glutton and a drunkard. But when the child gets to a certain age, when they're rebellious, they're a glutton, they're a drunkard, they're not listening to their parents, then this would be a consequence. It's very different to the idea of, oh, I'm going to call child protective services if you don't leave me alone. Maybe we'll take you out to the elders of the city. How do you feel about that? Society would be very different, wouldn't it, if these things were instituted? Romans 1:32 is interesting for us when we're considering these things. I'll come to an end in a second. Who, though they know the righteousness of Elohim, that those who practice such deserve death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. Okay, so we know that all of those things that we've looked at, those people are deserving of death. Okay, but something that I've considered, and particularly this week actually, the idea that when we take things in as entertainment, we look at things that contain sin, we look at TV programs, okay, we look at films or computer games or whatever it is, okay, that contain sin. We're approving of those who practice in them. We're taking it in as entertainment. And we might well watch it and go, oh, it's terrible, isn't it? Look at the terrible things that they're doing. But we're taking it in as entertainment. We're liking it. We're deriving pleasure from doing it. And it's just something that we should bear in mind. Deuteronomy 21:22-23 says something that's interesting that we'll finish on this passage. It says, when a man has committed a sin worthy of death, okay, we know the righteousness of Elohim, that those things are worthy of death, same concept, then he shall be put to death, and you shall hang him on a tree. This is part of the death penalty that I don't think people reckon with quite so much. Let his body not remain overnight on the tree, but you shall certainly bury him the same day. For he who is hanged is accursed of Elohim, that you do not defile the land which YHVH your Elohim is giving you as an inheritance. So when somebody receives the death penalty, they're to be hung on a tree to show that they're accursed of Elohim, to show that the land is not defiled by their blood, because they are actually accursed of Elohim. And it goes back to that concept that we were looking at before of, you shall not take anything into your house. Okay, if it's devoted to destruction, you shall utterly loathe it and you shall hate it. These people, all the people who commit any of these things, we ought to have the same mindset towards them as Elohim. And that's what the judges were there for. Okay, they were there to mete out this justice, the way that YHVH said things actually were, rather than man having this idea of good and evil in their minds and saying, oh, maybe we'll let them off with this, or maybe we'll send them to prison for 12 years and when they come out maybe they'll be better, or whatever notions we have in our head. YHVH's system was very different, and we'll look at how it was instituted in the second part. Okay, Deuteronomy 17 verse 8 tells us about these judges and these Shoftim, these officers. It says, when any matter arises which is too hard. We've looked at that word before. It's the same word as when it says, if you make a vow and it's too hard. Okay, it's the word pala, too wondrous, too hard for you to judge. Between blood and blood, between plea and plea, or between stroke and stroke, matters of strife within your gates, then you shall rise up and go to the place which YHVH, your Elohim, chooses, which was Yerushalayim. Okay, so when there was a matter of strife that they come to the judges about, and it was too hard for the judges that were within their gates to decide, they went up to Jerusalem. Well, this is an example of the sort of matters that were to be brought to the people who were to judge. Okay, when you've got a dispute with somebody, we see Yeshua talking about it in Matthew 18. You know, go and speak to them, then go and get witnesses. Bring your witnesses with them if they won't listen to them. Then bring it to the assembly, bring it to the leaders, to the people who are to judge. So whether it's a matter that's between people, or whether it's just a matter of what does the Torah say about this, this is what these men were there in place to answer. So, like I said before, these people were not infallible people. And just like today, you're going to have leadership, especially people online, because I get these sort of things said about, well, how can we trust these men? They're not infallible men. They're not to be infallible. These people weren't infallible. They were just people who were put into this position because it was YHVH's system of how it was supposed to be. And you would hope that you could, if you've got the discernment, you could choose good leadership who were led by YHVH in decisions. But the point simply being, they were not infallible people. And the people who will be in leadership today, Charlie and I, are not infallible people, and just make the best decisions that we can from knowing YHVH's word. We used to go to them, and if they can't reconcile it, you go up to the higher authority, basically. And she'll come to the priests, the Levites, and to the judge. Again, it's the priests, the Levites, the judge, the people who know the Torah, who is in those days, and shall inquire, and they shall declare to you the word of mishpat. In other words, they will declare to you what YHVH says is to be done in these cases. In Ephesians 4:11-16, it says he gave some as apostles, some as prophets, some as evangelists, some as shepherds and teachers. Okay, so he gifts people in these ways. Some people will be gifted in all of these ways. Some people will be gifted in one of these ways. Apostles are people who are sent out with the word to people. You have the Apostle Paul, who went out and planted churches. Okay, some as prophets, those who speak by the Spirit the word of YHVH, or words from YHVH. This is the word that YHVH declares. Some as evangelists. Evangelists are people who bring the good news. That's what the word means, to eulogize. It means to bring the gospel, essentially. Shepherds, pastors, teachers, ones who teach the word. For the perfecting of the set apart ones, to the work of service, to a building up of the body of the Messiah. Just like the Levites would serve in the tabernacle, in the temple, here we have these people working in the body of Messiah, which is the temple. Until we all come to the unity of the belief and of the knowledge of the Son of Elohim, to a perfect man, to the measure of the stature of the completeness of Messiah. I mentioned before that what they would have is they would have the Torah being read every 7 years. To everyone corporately, the entire Torah being read every 7 years. You would also have the Levites in the individual communities to whom they could go and ask, what does the Torah say about this? You didn't have everyone with their own copy of the scriptures coming to their own private interpretation of what the scriptures meant. It was taught to them. This is the system that YHVH had set up. This is how it would still be today. It says if the first covenant had been faultless, no place would have been sought for the second. And then he says that the fault was that they didn't do the first covenant. So if it had been faultless, this is the situation that we would have today. The idea being, look, the Torah is incredibly simple. What is righteousness, how we're to walk, to love one another, all of those things are incredibly, incredibly simple. It doesn't take a lot to teach all those things. All of the extraneous things, all the peripheral things around these things, like, oh, what does this prophecy mean, and this, that, and the other, trying to put it all together. It just leads people astray. It causes massive confusion in people. All that people really needed to know, as we can see from the fact that the Torah instituted this system, is how to walk righteously. What the Torah says. What should we do? Loving one another. Just real simple things that everybody can get. And this is what these people are to do. They're to bring everybody together in unity to walk out these very simple things, these very simple righteous principles that are very easy to grasp. All of the controversies that people have, they aren't of any kind of profit to anybody whatsoever. We all to come together to the unity of belief and the knowledge of the Son of Elohim, to a perfect man. This is in the book of Ephesians, just after it said, we are now one new man. Israel described as one man. That's how nations would be described. Now we are one new man as the body of Messiah, and we're to come together under these people who can teach us these very simple principles. And we can walk out the faith that we're supposed to. So that we should no longer be children tossed and borne about by every wind of teaching, by the trickery of men, in cleverness unto the craftiness of leading astray. These people are gifted by the Spirit so that they can teach these principles to people. Everybody wants to think, well, I am led by the Spirit. Okay, it says the Spirit will lead me into all truth. And that's true. But the way that the body is put together is that there are some in the body who are there to teach, not people who are above their brethren, as Yeshua says. Okay, they've just got a different function within the body. If it was true when everyone says, I'm led by the Spirit and I've been led to this doctrine or that doctrine, then everybody wouldn't have different doctrines, unless the people who are saying that think, I am the only person on the earth that is led by the Spirit. Okay. We're to come together in unity. These things are not hard to grasp. They're very simple. They can be very simply taught. Matters of what calendar do you follow? When does the day start? And all things like that. You can come to a teacher and you can follow whatever the body are following in that area. And then when Mashiach comes back, he will set those things straight, but they're not the important things of Scripture. Of course, we would all like to know for absolute certain whether or not it's one way or it's another, but they're not the important things. The very simple elements of our faith is what we're to come together in unity, and we're to love each other and walk in righteousness and be pleasing before Elohim as his body. But maintaining the truth in love, we grow up in all respects into him who is the head. Mashiach, that's the goal. Okay, maintaining the truth in love. And I know that this is going to be unpopular and people are going to say, but what calendar you're on is the truth. We need to know what the truth is. Like, well, okay, so it is the truth. It is the actual truth, but can you say that you have the truth? Can anyone say that they definitely have the truth? Are you going to convince anyone of anything? What exactly are we trying to achieve in these things? Verse 16 says, from whom the entire body joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the working by which each part does its share, causes the growth of the body for the building up of itself in love. This is the whole purpose of us being a body. This is the whole purpose of all these people having been given these gifts. Paul says, you are a body of Mashiach and members individually. And Elohim has appointed these in the assembly. Firstly, apostles. Second, prophets. Thirdly, teachers. After that, miracles, or those who work by Yehovah's power would probably be a better way of putting that. Then gifts of healings, helps, ministrations. Ministrations is kind of like advice or godly counsel. Kinds of tongues. And some people, again, will be gifted in all of these things. Some people in some of them, and some people in one of them. But every person in the body will do what they're supposed to do. I've never healed anyone or done miracles or never spoken in tongues. But there are other things on this list that I can say he's gifted me in that. And he gifts people as is necessary for what the body needs at that precise moment. The problem is people want to take all of these things on themselves and say, that's a role that I would love to have. There was a guy came in the very, very early days of us having a fellowship, and I've always kind of felt a sense with certain people that the fact that I'm quite young is something that is I don't know, something that doesn't quite sit right with them. I mean, I'm 35, I'm not like baby young, but I can see why people coming from a worldly perspective would think, well, this person's quite young, so why would they have any authority? I remember this guy kind of talking to me in a roundabout way about it, and he was like, you know, perhaps it's not good for you to be a pastor, and it says that the young should not be in leadership in case they are given over to Satan. We're being neophyte, a new convert, not somebody who is young. But then he said to me, you know, I've always had a pastor's heart. I just thought, oh no. It's not a universal thing, but I think that if anybody wants the role, if anybody wants to be in authority over anyone else, or would look at these things and go, oh, I wish that I was an apostle and I could go forth and do this and do that, I don't think that they're quite the right people to do whatever it is. It's not a universal thing. I always wanted to teach the word of Elohim because I wanted to take the idea that this has always been taught wrong and tell people how it actually was. So I always wanted to be a teacher. So I can't quite say if you've ever wanted to do the job, you're not in the right place. But if you've wanted it for the wrong reasons, you've wanted it for, you know, something that it's not, you're probably not the person to do these things. Everybody just needs to recognize that Yehovah appoints the members of the body as he chooses, and he puts everybody exactly where they're meant to be. And nobody needs to kind of strive beyond themselves to be something that they think they need to be in Scripture, beyond righteous and loving and compassionate. Are all apostles, are all prophets, are all teachers, are all workers of miracles? Of course not. They're not, are they? If all the body was an eye, where would be the hearing? If all the hearing, where would be the smelling? Everyone wants to be the one who's making these decisions, like the judges. Oh, I would come to the right decision on this. And then, you know, this thing that I have judged to have been judged wrongly, I could put right, or whatever it is that people think. It's craziness. Yehovah appoints these things in the body where they're supposed to be. If all hearing, where would be the smelling? But now Elohim has set the members, each one of them in the body as he pleased. But people want to pick themselves up and be like, no, I want to do something else in the body. I'm going to find something else to do. And if they had all been one member, where would the body be? And now there are indeed many members, but one body. And an eye is unable to say to the hand, I have no need of you. And I've talked about this before, but this is this kind of idea that people don't need teachers. We don't need teachers. I've got no need of that part of the body. I'm led by the Spirit, and I've got all of these doctrines here, which, as you'll see, are in agreement with everybody else in the body. It's not right. We need to be focusing on coming together in the important things. Or again, the head to the feet. I have no need of you. And yet this is such a problem. Numbers 16, 3-4 says, they assembled against Moshe and against Aharon. This is Korach and his rebellion. They said to them, enough of you, For all the congregation is set apart, all of them, and Yehovah is in their midst. Why then do you lift yourselves up above the assembly of Yehovah? Because I think that this is kind of commonly how people understand things. When they don't really understand Yehovah's working in things, they don't really understand the picture and how it actually exists. They kind of think, well, those who are judging or leading, they have lifted themselves up. I'm pretty sure that that guy that I was just talking about, who said that he'd always had the pastor's heart, was thinking, why has JP lifted himself up above the congregation? We're all set apart. I've always had the pastor's heart, for example. Why am I not pastor? Verse 4 says, and when Moshe heard, he fell on his face and spoke to Korach and all his company, saying, tomorrow morning Yehovah shall make known who is his and who is set apart. And of course he will. I always think of this principle, if not this exact verse. I just think when people want to go and say, I'm going to be the ear or I'm going to be the hand or whatever, I just think, okay, Yehovah is going to make known who he's set apart to do these things. Verse 10 says, and you shall do according to the word which they declare to you from that place which Yehovah chooses, not infallible men. Okay, but you shall guard to do according to all that they instruct you. Why? Because they're going to be 100% right about 100% of things 100% of the time? Well, hopefully Yehovah will guide them in these things, but that wasn't the point. Okay, the point was Yehovah has set these things up to be such a way, and that's how he wants it. He set every member of the body exactly as he wants it to be. He set all the governments of the world exactly as he wants them to be right now to achieve the ends that he wants them to achieve. Do according to the Torah in which they teach you, according to the justice which they say to you. You do not turn to the right or to the left from the word which they declare to you. The man who acts arrogantly so as to not listen to the priest who stands to serve there before Yehovah your Elohim, or to the judge, that man shall die. So you shall purge the evil from Israel. So just as in the past, the same is true now. These people are worthy of death because they are acting arrogantly. Okay? Let all the people hear and fear and no longer do arrogantly. People really don't like being under any kind of authority of any man. They don't like being under government's authority, though the scriptures instruct them to be. I can understand this. I hated the idea of ever being under anyone's authority. It was so refreshing to find the word and to find what true authority was. But people just can't stand it. They can't stand when Yehovah has instituted things in a certain way, and I truly believe that it is a test of their heart. Romans 13, 1-2, okay, human governments again. Let every soul be in subjection to the governing authorities. There is no authority except from Elohim, and the authorities that exist are appointed by Elohim. This isn't talking about in the church. This is talking about in the world. So he who opposes the authority withstands the institution of Elohim. Be subject to every institution of man because of the master, whether to king as supreme or to governors as to those who are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and the praise for those who do good. Because such is the will of Elohim, that by doing good you should put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. And what we're going to look at when we look at 2 Samuel is a narrative that really kind of brings all of these things to the forefront. It puts people in all these different positions, people who disagree with the human ruler, with King David. And David's not right in a lot of the things that he actually says, but it's just interesting to see the various different ways that people react to him and the places where they all actually end up, and then to see that as a picture of Mashiach and his judgment, and where those people will end up for acting in such a way towards him. Exodus 12:16, put this scripture in, and I've spoken about it before when I spoke to Zach Lang about whether or not it was forbidden to cook on Shabbat. I put this in because he prefaced the conversation. One of the first things that he said in the conversation was, regardless of any of this, we think of you and Charlie as our teachers, and we will go with your judgment on it. Same with Exodus 20 verse 10. Okay, you don't make a stranger who's within your gates work. This issue came up the other week with Stevie. One of the first things that Stevie pointed out about this, I think reading into it a little bit, maybe the reason that he was a bit like, come on guys, sort this out, is because he said, you guys are my teachers and I'll do what you say to do in the matter. Okay, so we've had people with the correct response, and that is the correct response when YHVH has put an authority in place. In 1 Corinthians 11 verse 14 it says, does not nature itself teach you that if a man indeed has long hair, it is a disrespect to him? Now, this is in the scriptures, and we interpret this in the way that we interpret it. If anyone's interested in the details, there's a teaching saying, should a man have long hair, where we take it all back to Torah. When this has become an issue before, there were two people who were in the fellowship, one of whom ended up, really long hair, ended up, he shaved his head. Ended up leaving the fellowship anyway, but he shaved his head. He did the right thing in that situation. The other person took great umbrage with this, and the thing that they said to me was, I went out and spoke to them about it. I went out to the woods and spoke and talked about a load of issues, and the thing that it came down to with them was, he said, have you ever been wrong? I was like, that's really not the point. Yes, I've been wrong before in the past, but that's not the point. That's not the bit of this that you're missing the mark with. So I would challenge people who are watching, and people who are watching online who don't like the idea of, I don't follow any teacher. If you're part of a fellowship and there is some kind of authority that's there, that you are to acquiesce to that authority, whether or not you think they're right. Because in these cases, when you would go and you would be judging between one person and another person, what that would guarantee is that there was always one party who thought that the judge was wrong in their judgment. Always, every single time, there was somebody who thought that they were wrong. But that was not an okay to them to then go and do whatever they wanted to do. If they did that, they were acting arrogantly, and they were acting arrogantly against YHVH, and scriptures tell us that doing such is worthy of death. So I'd really ask people to consider where they're at in regards to those things. 2 Timothy 4:2-3 says, proclaim the word, be urgent in season, out of season, reprove, warn, appeal with all patience and teaching. For there shall be a time when they shall not bear sound teaching, but according to their own desires they heap up for themselves teachers tickling the ear. Okay, if you can't find the response that you want, okay, you go somewhere else which teaches according to something which is more comfortable to you. I rang Charlie up the other day to see if he could remember what exactly it was in this issue, but there was a couple that used to come along. I can't remember exactly what it was, but they came to us to say, what does the word say about this? And we'd said to them, this is what it says. Whatever it was, I don't even think it was a big issue in any way. But the immediate thing that they did upon hearing about this and hearing what the word said is they went and they called up another pastor that we knew to see if they would disagree, a bit like when the kids go to their mum and say, Mum, can I have some sweeties, please? No, you can't have any sweeties. They go to their dad, Dad, could I have some sweeties, please? It's exactly the same. We can recognize in that situation what the child is doing, that it's manipulative and that it's wrong and that it's deceitful. We need to recognize that within ourselves as well, okay? Proverbs 13:18-20 says, poverty and shame are for him who ignores discipline, but he who heeds reproof is esteemed. The desire accomplished is sweet to the soul, but to turn away from evil is an abomination to fools. And I love that piece of scripture because it requires a little bit of a deeper thought about exactly what it's saying here. Okay, so if it's your desire to turn away from evil, that will be sweet to your soul. But to a fool, it would be an abomination. Verse 20 says, he who walks with the wise shall be wise, but the companion of fools suffers evil. You will always be able to find a fool to agree with you, a fool who will tolerate your sin, a fool who will tell you that everything is okay. But it's not going to profit you anything to do that. All that will happen is you've changed your company from the company of those who are wise to the company of fools. 1 Kings 3:7-9 says, and now, O Yehovah my Elohim, you have set up your servant to reign instead of my father David. But I am a little child. I do not know how to go out or to come in. And your servant is in the midst of your people whom you have chosen, a great people too numerous to be numbered or counted. Shall you then give to your servant an understanding heart to rule or to judge, is the verb which is actually there. Your people to discern between good and evil, for who is able to judge this great people of yours? Solomon recognized what the problem was. I'm king. I've got to make these decisions now, and these are going to affect all of the people. Give me a wise and understanding heart so that I am able to do it appropriately. Because these people couldn't just go, well, you think that Solomon's wrong in what he's saying. We're not going to do that. They would have to do this. So Solomon recognizes this problem. In 1 Kings 7:7, it says that he made a hall for the throne, and he called it the hall of Mishpat. Okay, the hall where Yehovah's justice or judgment would be meted out by the human authority, where he judged, and it was paneled with cedar from floor to floor. In 2 Samuel 13:11-12, Yehovah said to King David, he said, see, I am raising up evil against you from your own house, and shall take your wives before your eyes, and give them to your neighbor, and he shall lie with your wives in the sight of this sun. For you did it in secret, but I shall do this deed before all Israel and before the sun. Okay, so what we're going to see now in the narrative in 2 Samuel needs to be understood in this context. What we're going to see with David and with Absalom, who is David's son. This was pronounced upon David as a judgment, as mishpat from Yehovah. So from the human perspective, we're going to see in this story, and I want you to take hold of these names, because each one of these people is going to tell us something about people who are in the world. It's also going to tell us about how those people are going to be judged by Messiah ultimately. So his enemies in all of this, primary was Absalom. And he was David's son, and he tried to take control of Israel. Ahithophel was David's friend and counselor, and he defected to Absalom's rebellion. Shimei was a Benjamite man, and he cursed David. And we'll see what the end of these people is. David actually ends up being very forgiving to Shimei, but we'll see what his ultimate end is in all of this. Adoniah was a man who wishes to seize the kingdom as David's death drew near. So what we're going to see is Absalom carrying out these things at first, and then Adoniah doing exactly the same thing at the end. The links between those two people are quite interesting. David's friends in all of this, in the narrative we'll look at, are Mephibosheth of the house of Shaul, okay, David's enemies, okay. David wished to show to him Yehovah's kindness. So this was a man who was lame in his feet. David wanted to show him kindness, so he had him come to eat at the table of the sons of the king. Hushai, he remained loyal to David by infiltrating Jerusalem and giving advice contrary to Ahithophel. So Ahithophel was David's counselor. He defected to Absalom's rebellion, and he was giving advice, and it was very well revered and regarded advice. Hushai contradicted this advice. Barzillai was a guy who provided David with what he needed whilst he was in the wilderness in a place called Machanaim. David's commanders in this, there was a guy called Joab, and there was a guy called Ittai, and there's a guy called Abishai, and we'll see all of these things. But I want you to be familiar with these names, because sometimes when you read in Hebrew names in these narratives, it can be a bit like, who's that guy again? So in 2 Samuel 13, 20 to 21, right after we've seen David receive this curse from Yehovah, and Absalom, her brother, said to her, so there's this woman called Tamar, and David's got various sons. One of them's Absalom, one of them is a guy called Amnon, and Amnon fancies his half-sister Tamar. She's Absalom's full sister, so he has her come, and he pretends to be sick. And when she comes to tend to him, he ends up raping her. Okay. Absalom, her brother, said to her, has Amnon, your brother, been with you? But now keep silent, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this matter to heart. So Tamar remained in the house of her brother Absalom, but was ruined. And King David heard all these reports, and he was very wroth. Okay, so David is the authority in this matter. He's the king. He gets to mete out justice in the land. He's heard of all of these things, and he's very angry. Absalom spoke to his brother Amnon, neither good nor evil, for Absalom hated Amnon because he had humbled his sister Tamar. And what we're going to see about Absalom is that he is a person who is willing to take into his hands the judgment. If King David rules in a way that he is not happy with, he's perfectly happy to take those things into his own hands and deal with them as he thinks is appropriate. Even though Yehovah's raised up King David and he's his anointed, his judgment's not good enough for him. So what we're going to see is that Absalom has a meal for all of the king's sons, and he's going to have Amnon killed there by his servants. Then the servants of Absalom did to Amnon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the sons of the king rose up, and each one mounted his mule and fled. And it came to be while they were on the way that news came to David saying, Absalom is smitten all the sons of the king. Not one of them is left. And the king rose up and tore his garments and lay on the ground, and all his servants stood by with their garments torn. And Jonadab of Shema, David's brother, answered and said, do not let my master say they've killed all the young men, the sons of the king, for only Amnon is dead. For by the command of Absalom, this has been appointed from the day that he humbled his sister Tamar. So Absalom had what he thought was just to be done in this circumstance. Okay? David knew about this. Absalom knows that David knows about this and goes against David's judgment in the matter. And we might think, well, Absalom was in the right. You know, his sister's been raped, and he's looking out for his sister, or whatever else, whatever other things we might have in our head. We might actually agree. But the point is, King David had not ruled so. And now, let not my master the king take this matter to heart, to think that all the sons of the kings are dead, for only Amnon is dead. And Absalom fled, and the young man who was watching lifted up his eyes and looked, and saw many people were coming from the way behind him, on the side of the hill. Then Jonadab said to the king, look, the sons of the king are coming, as your servant said, so it is. And it came to be, as soon as he had finished speaking, that look, the sons of the king came, and they lifted up their voice and wept, and the king too, and all his servants wept very bitterly. And Absalom fled and went to Talmai, son of Ammihud, king of Geshur, and David mourned for his son all the days. As we're going through this, I want you to think of the two things in parallel to each other. Okay, King David is a picture of Yeshua and how Yeshua responds. You know, the death of his sons. These are sons of the king that we're talking about. So Absalom fled and went to Geshur, and he was there 3 years. King David then longed to go to Absalom, for he had been comforted concerning Amnon because he was dead. So Amnon's dead. King David gets over it. He wants now to go to Absalom in this place where he is. This is where he was, okay? He was in the land of Geshur. You'll notice that the land of Geshur is not a part of the land of Israel. And this is relevant because if he had killed him in the land of Israel, which he has, then he would have had to have either gone to a city of refuge, it wasn't an accidental killing, so he couldn't have, but wherever he went in the land of Israel, that would have been required of him. Okay, so he flees to a place that's not a part of the land of Israel, where nobody can come. The revenger of blood cannot come to that land to kill him, because it would be murder in that land. So now we're going to see King David, and he is asked to make a judgment in a case which is very similar to this. Yoav, son of Zeruiah, that's Yoav, he ends up being one of David's commanders, the commander of the army, knew that the heart of the king was towards Absalom. And Yoav sent to Tekoa and brought from there a wise woman and said to her, please pretend to be a mourner and put on mourning garments, and do not anoint yourself with oil, but act like a woman who has been mourning a long time for the dead. Then you shall go to the king and speak to him according to this word. And Yoav puts the words in her mouth. So Yoav thinks that he knows what's right to do in this instance. He thinks it's okay to manipulate the king, because he knows that the king's heart is towards Absalom. So now he's going to go out and try to make the king see things differently, so that he can bring back Absalom and forgive him. And when the woman of Tekoa spoke to the king, she fell on her face to the ground and did obeisance and said, save, O king. And the king said to her, what is your trouble? And she answered, truly I am a widow, my husband is dead, and your female servant had 2 sons, and the 2 fought with each other in the field, and there was no one to part them, but the one smote the other and killed him. So just like with Absalom and Amnon. And see, the entire clan has risen up against your female servant and said, give him who smote his brother, so that we put him to death for the life of his brother. Just like Israel. Okay, if Absalom was in Israel, this would be required of him, because he killed his brother, whom he killed and destroyed the heir also. Thus they would extinguish my burning coal that is left, and leave to my husband neither name nor remnant on the earth. And the king said to the woman, go to your house and let me give orders concerning you. And the woman of Tekoa said to the king, my master, O king, let the crookedness be on me and on my father's house, and the king and his throne be guiltless. And the king said, whoever speaks to you, bring him to me, and let him no longer touch you. So he is judged in this case that this woman's son who is left should not be found guilty. Okay, that he is going to protect this son. And she said, please let the king remember YHVH your Elohim, and the Redeemer of blood not destroy any more, lest they destroy my son. And he said, as YHVH lives, not one hair of your son shall fall to the ground. So he's in this position to make this judgment, and he's not making it according to the Torah. David gets this incorrect. And the woman said, please let your female servant speak a word to my master, the king. And he said, speak. And the woman said, and why have you reasoned like this against the people of Elohim? For in speaking this word, the king is as one who is guilty, in that the king does not bring his outcast one home again. So she says, look, it's the same situation as it is with you and Absalom. Why have you made this judgment in this case? Because you've declared yourself guilty in the judgment that you've made with Absalom. For we shall certainly die and become like spilled water spilled on the ground, which is not gathered up again. Yet Elohim does not take away a life, but shall devise ways so that his outcast ones are not cast out from him. And this is what people will do. Okay, they love to twist the word. They love to say, yeah, that's exactly right. Elohim doesn't want to be like that. He wants to be like this. You know, he wouldn't kill his outcast ones that are cast out from him. Look, he says that he'll bring them home. That's exactly what Elohim's like. But let's remember that this decision is not correct in accordance with the Torah. People like to dismiss that, and they like to kind of fluffify it all and go, oh yeah, Elohim's all about love, and you know, he wouldn't want to be like that. And yeah, how could King David say this? That's not right. That's not the Elohim that I know. It's exactly what this woman's doing here. Elohim would do the same. He doesn't take away a life. He does the same with the ones that are cast out from him. And now I have come to speak this word to my master the king, because the people have made me afraid. And your female servant said, please let me speak to the king. It could be that the king does what his female servant asks. oh, I've thrown myself on your mercy. I came to you because I was terrified of what the people would say, and I've come and I've said, maybe the king, maybe he will be righteous in this and he will protect me. For the king has listened to deliver his female servant from the hand of the man seeking to destroy me and my son together from the inheritance of Elohim. Then your female servant said, please let the word of my master the king be comforting. For my master the king is as an angel of Elohim in discerning the good and the evil, and Yehovah your Elohim is with you. As I say, he gets it wrong. He said, okay, the people can't kill you and they can't kill your son. Well, they couldn't kill her anyway. They could only kill her son. But he's not an authority that can take away the word of Elohim and say, no, it's okay. We're going to ignore the Torah now. And the king answered and said to the woman, please do not hide from me the matter that I'm asking you. And the woman said, please let my master the king speak. And the king said, is the hand of Yoav with you in all this? And the woman answered and said, as your soul lives, my master the king, no one turns to the right or to the left from all that my master the king has spoken. I hate this woman. Oh, as the king is alive, nobody could possibly deceive you, O king. For your servant Yoav commanded me, and he put all these words in the mouth of your female servant. Your servant Yoav has done this to change the appearance of the matter. But my master is wise according to the wisdom of an angel of Elohim to know all that is in the earth. And the king said to Yoav, see now, you shall do this matter. Go and bring back the young man Absalom. And Yoav fell to the ground on his face and did obeisance and blessed the king. And Yoav said, today your servant knows that I have found favor in your eyes, my master, O king, and that the king has done the word of his servant. Okay, they're all kind of fluffing David up in all of this. But David has not made the decision in accordance with the Torah. And we're going to see as we go on that this Yoav, he looks like a righteous man. He's the commander of the army in Israel. But when it comes to something that David has decided that he doesn't agree with, he's quite prepared to just go against it. Yoav rose up and went to Geshur and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. And the king said, let him return to his own house, but do not let him see my face. And Absalom went to his own house and did not see the king's face. And in all Israel there was no one who was praised as much as Absalom for his good looks. From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, there was no blemish in him. And when he cut the hair of his head, for it was at every year's end that he cut it because it was heavy on him. When he cut it, he weighed the hair of his head at 200 shekels by the king's weight. So he's not cutting his hair because it's what the scriptures would instruct him to do. He's cutting it because it got too heavy on him. To Absalom were born 3 sons and 1 daughter whose name was Tamar. She was a woman of fair appearance. Obviously, after the Tamar, there was his sister. Now what we're going to see is kind of what is important to Absalom. He's been to Jerusalem. He's not seen the king's face all of this time. And this is what he desires. He wishes to go and be seen by the king. Well, let's see how he goes about it. Absalom dwelt in Jerusalem 2 years, and he had not seen the king's face. Then Absalom sent for Yoav to send him to the king, but he would not come to him. And again the second time, but he would not come. So what do you think he does? Does he just say, oh, Yoav obviously isn't going to come. I will perhaps see the king if it is Yehovah's will? He said to his servants, see, Yoav's field is near mine, and he has barley there. Go and set it on fire. And Absalom's servants set the field on fire. Then Yoav rose and came up to the house of Absalom and said to him, why have your servants set my field on fire? And Absalom said to Yoav, oh, I'm sorry, it was a huge mistake. I don't know what I was thinking. No. He says, look, I sent to you, saying, come here so that I send you to the king to say, why have I come from Geshur? Why have you set my field on fire? I sent to you saying, come here. Oh, yeah. Oh, you're right. Of course. I can see why the arson now. It was good for me while I was there. And now let me see the king's face. And if there is any crookedness in me, then you shall put me to death. Yoav then went to the king and informed him. And he called for Absalom. And he came to the king and bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king. Then the king kissed Absalom. And this is what he's looking for. But this falling on his face during obeisance to the king is all a show. The very next verse, we're going to see what he does. He raises up for himself a little army, horses and chariots, 50 men to run before him. It came to be after this that Absalom prepared the chariot and horses for himself and 50 men to run before him. Okay, so he's now seeing the face of the king. That's what he wanted. The king kissed him. What does he do? He goes and he raises up a little army for himself. And Absalom used to rise early and stand beside the way to the gate. And it came to be whenever anyone had a complaint, anyone who had a complaint came to the king for a right ruling, that Absalom would call to him and say, "What city are you from?" And when he said, "Your servant is from such and such a tribe of Israel," Absalom would say to him, "Look, your matters are good and right. But you have nobody from the king to shema you." Okay? So these people come for justice from the king. The king is the one who is appointed to make these decisions. These people come along to have a decision made, and Absalom jumps in the way, and he's like, "Oh, no, you're right. It's a shame that no one from the king would hearken to you. You're right, your matters are good and right, though." Absalom would say, "Oh, that I were made Shaphat, judge in the land, and everyone who has any complaint or case would come to me, and I shall let right be done by him." Okay, you don't want to go to the king. No, the king's not going to listen to you. You want to come to me. "Oh, that I would judge. I've already judged your case. All I've known is which tribe you're from. Your matters are good and right. Whatever it is, you're in the right here." It came to be whenever anyone came near to him to bow down to him, that he would put out his hand and take him and kiss him. Whenever anyone came near that was prepared to bow down to him, he would take him and kiss him. And Absalom did this to all Israel who came to the king for justice, for mishpat. And Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel by telling them that they were in the right. Because who wants to go to the king and find out that maybe you're not in the right? Nobody wants that, do they? Because one party is always going to think that the king was wrong in whatever the judgment was. But whoever came to the king for judgment, Absalom would say, no, your matters are right. "Oh, that I was made judge. Oh, that I was a ruler in Israel." And it came to be at the end of 4 years that Absalom said to the king, "Please let me go to Hebron and pay the vow which I have vowed to Yehovah. For your servant vowed a vow while I dwelt at Geshur in Aram, saying, if Yehovah indeed brings me back to Jerusalem, then I shall serve Yehovah." I don't know if he ever made such a vow, but he certainly doesn't fulfill it. All that he actually wants is to go to this place, Hebron, because Hebron was one of these cities of refuge. So he wants to dwell in the city of refuge within Israel. And he's willing to play on the fact that David is a righteous man. He says, "I've paid a vow to Yehovah. How can I get the king to let me leave Jerusalem? I'll tell him that I've made a vow to Yehovah, then he must let me go. For your servant vowed a vow while I dwelt at Geshur in Aram, saying, if Yehovah indeed brings me back to Jerusalem, then I shall serve Yehovah." And the king said to him, "Go in peace." And he rose up and went to Hebron. But Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, "As soon as you hear the sound of the ram's horn, then you shall say, Absalom is king in Hebron." So he's like, let me go to Hebron, the place where King David isn't. Okay, and when I get there, I've gone and sent all these people out to sound the ram's horn and say, now Absalom is the king. Wanted to be ruler. He told everybody that his judgments were just, he would judge their cases differently and he would judge them that they were right. He lies to David, goes off to Hebron, and he says, as soon as I arrive, I want you to declare me to be king there. And with Absalom went 200 men from Jerusalem who were invited, and they went along unsuspectingly and did not know the matter at all. Absalom also sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite, counselor of David, from his city, from Gilo, while he was bringing offerings. And it came to be that the conspiracy became strong, for the people with Absalom kept increasing. So he wins the hearts of the men of Israel by saying, if I were judge, I would judge your matters correctly. And then all these people go off with him unsuspectingly, and he calls for David's counselor to come and be there too. And the conspiracy became strong. Then a messenger came to David saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom. And David said to all his servants who were with him at Jerusalem, rise up and let us flee, for none of us shall escape from Absalom. Go in haste, lest he overtakes us quickly and brings evil upon us and smites the city with the edge of the sword. And now we're going to see this line being drawn between those who remain faithful to King David and those whose hearts are won by the lies of Absalom. And the king's servants said to the king, look, your servants shall do according to all that my master, the king, chooses. And this becomes the theme throughout all of it. The ones who are willing to do what the king says, even when they disagree. And we're going to see some examples of that. And the ones who, when the king decrees something that they disagree with, are more willing to just go and rebel. 2 Samuel 15, 19 to 21 says, and the king said to Ittai the Gittite, okay, so there was two commanders. There was Joab and there was Ittai. There's also Abishai as well. This is Ittai. Why do you go, you also with us? Turn back and remain with the king, for you are a foreigner and also an exile from your own place. So this guy is a foreigner and he's an exile. You came yesterday, and should I today make you wander up and down with us when I'm going wherever I'm going? Return and take your brothers back. Kindness and truth be with you. It's like, you are a newcomer. You're a foreigner to this land. Why would you come with me? Why not just stay in Jerusalem? And Ittai answered the king and said, as Yehovah lives, and as my master the king lives, in whatever place my master the king is, whether in death or life, let your servant also be there. So he says, no, I will come with you. He's a man who recognizes that David is the king. David said, why don't you stay with the king? Absalom, why don't you stay with him? He'll be here in a second. He'll be in Jerusalem. And he says, no, I will go wherever my master, the king, wherever he goes. 2 Samuel 15, 24 to 37. And see, Zadok also came, and all the Levites with him. You hear about the Zadokite priesthood, okay, the ones who will be the priests in the millennium. This is why the sons of Zadok are the ones who become the priests, because they were the ones who remained faithful to David when he left Jerusalem. They came bearing the ark of the covenant of Elohim, and they set down the ark of Elohim, and Abiathar went up until all the people completed passing over from the city. And the king said to Zadok, take the ark of Elohim back to the city. If I find favor in the eyes of Yehovah, then he shall bring me back and show me both it and his dwelling. Remember the context. He knows what's going on with Yehovah, and that this is something that Yehovah has brought about. But David chose the exact opposite kind of reaction. Okay, even when things are going badly for David, even when he doesn't like it, he says, we will see how it turns out. If this is what Yehovah wills, then I'm willing for this to happen to me. If that's what the king decrees, then I'm happy for this to happen to me. But the other people we'll see in the narrative, or a lot of them, they're not happy when the king decrees something they disagree with. But if he says thus, I have not delighted in you, here I am. Let him do to me as seems good in his eyes. And the king said to Zadok the priest, are you not a seer? Return to the city in peace, and your two sons with you, Ahimaach your son, and Jehonathan, son of Abiathar. See, I am waiting in the desert plains of the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me. And David went up by ascent of the Mount of Olives and wept as he went up. And this narrative, one of the first times that I came across this narrative was in a book that was called, I think it was called The Scroll of the Gospel of David by a guy called Tony Robinson. I'd recommend, if people are reading through this narrative and you're thinking, oh, that's interesting, David went up to the top of the Mount of Olives, that's quite like Yeshua. And see the gospel story in this account. And you might notice things like that as we go through. And wept as he went up, and he had his head covered and went barefoot, and all the people who were with him covered their heads and went up, weeping as they went up. And David was informed, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. And David said, O Yehovah, I pray you, make the counsel of Ahithophel foolish. Bear in mind that all of this is happening to David because Yehovah has said, this punishment is going to come upon you. He's saying, whatever Yehovah decrees to happen to me, I'm happy for it to happen to me. But he prays to him and says, I pray you make the counsel of Ahithophel foolish. Then the very next thing that happens, it came to be that David came to the summit where he bowed himself before Elohim, and he saw Hushai the Archite coming to meet him with his robe torn and dust on his head. And David said to him, if you pass on with me, then you shall become a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I'm your servant, O king, a servant of your father, but now I'm your servant, then you shall nullify the counsel of Ahithophel for me. So in this, Yehovah is going to use Hushai to nullify Ahithophel's advice. But he wasn't doing it for David's sake. Okay, David is undergoing all of this because that's what Yehovah has decreed. It says that he was doing it to bring evil on Absalom. So, for David, it was a punishment. And Yehovah was using all of these circumstances as a way to punish David. But he also uses these circumstances to punish the people by whom he's bringing the punishment on David. And are not Zadok and Abiathar the priests with you there? And it shall be that every matter you hear from the king's house, you should report to Zadok and Abiathar the priests. See, there are with them their two sons, Ahimaaz, Zadok's son, and Jehonathan, Abia's son. And by them you shall send to me every matter you hear. So the priests that are still there in Jerusalem, Hushai the Archite, by means of these people, word is going to be sent to King David. And Hushai, David's friend, went into the city, and Absalom came into Jerusalem. So David leaves Jerusalem. He knows what's going to come in the future. Absalom comes and he takes over Jerusalem, having declared himself to be king in Hebron. 2 Samuel 16, 1-8 says, and David had passed on a little from the summit and saw Siva, the servant of Mephibosheth. Okay, so Mephibosheth was the guy that David wanted to show Yehovah's kindness to, so he'd allowed him to eat at the king's table. He was crippled in his feet or lame in his feet. This guy, Siva, is Mephibosheth's servant. He met him with a couple of saddled donkeys, and on them 200 loaves and 100 cakes of raisins and 100 summer fruit and a skin of wine. And the king said to Siva, why do you have these? And Siva said, the donkeys are for the king's household to ride on, and the bread and summer fruit for the young men to eat, and the wine for the weary to drink in the wilderness. And the king said, and where is the son of your master? Okay, he's talking about himself as the master. He's saying, where is Mephibosheth, basically. And Siva said to the king, see, he remains in Jerusalem, for he said, today the house of Israel is going to return the kingdom of my father to me. He was of the house of Saul, that David had taken that kingdom. Siva, Mephibosheth's servant, is saying, oh, he stayed in Jerusalem. He thinks that the kingdom is going to be returned to him. I don't know why he's saying these things. Okay, I don't know whether he is just telling lies about him or whether that's his actual interpretation of why Mephibosheth is still in Jerusalem. But as we'll see, that's not actually the case. The king said to Siva, see, all that belongs to Mephibosheth is yours. And Siva said, I've bowed myself. Let me find favor in your eyes, O my master the king. And when King David came to Bahurim, he saw a man from the house of the clan from man from the clan of the house of Shaul, whose name was Shimei, son of Gerah, coming from there. And he came out cursing as he came. So this is as David is leaving, okay, with the people who are with David. Now we've got this guy, Shimei. And he came at David with stones, and all the servants of King David, and all the people and all the mighty men were on his right and on his left. And this is what Shimei said as he cursed. Get out, O man of blood and man of Belial, man of worthlessness. Yehovah has brought upon you all the blood of the house of Shaul, in whose place you have reigned. And Yehovah has given the kingdom into the hand of Absalom, your son. And see, you are in your own evil, for you are a man of blood. So this guy, he sees these events which are going on. He sees that King David is in a bit of a situation. And then what does he do? He goes from his own limited perspective, his own understanding of what things are happening in the world, and he says, this has happened to you because of the house of Saul, because of the house that I belong to. This is why this is happening to you, David. And Abishai, son of Zeruiah, that's David's other commander, said to the king, why should this dead dog curse my master the king? Please let me pass over and take off his head. Now, Abishai is the opposite of Joab. Joab, when he doesn't think that David's ruled right, he'll kind of deceive, he'll kind of manipulate and kind of try to get David to see things his way, not in accordance with the Torah. Abishai, he's very kind of forthright in this. Let me go over and cut off his head. What's he doing, cursing my master the king? But the difference is, when it comes down to it, Abishai does what David says to do. He doesn't agree with him. He thinks it's a disgrace that this guy should be left alive. But he does what David says to do. The king said, what have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? For let him curse, because Yehovah said to him, curse David. And who should say, why did you do that? And David said to Abishai and all his servants, see how my son who has come from my own body seeks my life. And how much more now this Benjamite? Leave him alone and let him curse, for Yehovah has spoken to him. So again he says, look, not the situation I would have chosen. I don't want somebody cursing me there. I don't want to be kicked out of Jerusalem. I don't want Absalom off in this little rebellion. However, let Yehovah do what Yehovah is going to do. David said to Abishai and all his servants, see how my son who came from my own body, read that. If so be Yehovah does look on my affliction, and Yehovah shall return good to me for his cursing today. So he doesn't like that this guy's doing this. He knows that it's wrong, but he still acquiesces to the decision of the king, of Yehovah. And he says, if it's wrong, let Yehovah repay good for the wrong that has been done to me. And as David and his men went in the way, Shimei walked alongside him on the hillside and cursed as he went and threw stones at him and kicked up dust. And the king and all the people who were with him became weary, and they refreshed themselves there. And Absalom and all the people, the men of Israel, came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel, David's counselor, was with him. That's who David's talking about in the Psalms when he says, I was betrayed by my own friend. It's Ahithophel. And it came to be when Hushai the Archite, the friend of David, had come to Absalom, that Hushai said to Absalom, let the king live, let the king live. And Absalom said to Hushai, is this your kindness to your friend? Why did you not go with your friend? And Hushai said to Absalom, no, I am for the one whom Yehovah and this people and all the men of Israel have chosen, and I remain with him. And besides, whom should I serve? Should it not be before his son? As I have served before your father, so I am before you. And Absalom said to Ahithophel, give your advice. What should we do? And this is a man whose advice was greatly revered. And Ahithophel said to Absalom, go into your father's concubines, whom he has left to look after the house, and all Israel shall hear that you have made yourself a stench to your father, and the hands of all who are with you shall be strong. Go and do this thing, and this is going to prove to everyone who's with you that you are set against King David. Now this is actually what Yehovah said was David's punishment, what would come upon David. So YHVH is going to use this to bring punishment on David, but don't think that the perpetrators are guiltless because of that. So they pitched the tent for Absalom on top of the house, and Absalom went into his father's concubines before all the eyes of Israel. Now the advice Ahithophel gave in those days was as if one had inquired at the word of Elohim. So was all the advice of Ahithophel, both to David and to Absalom. And Ahithophel said to Absalom, he's got some more advice for him. He says, please let me choose 12,000 men, and let me arise and pursue David tonight, and come upon him while he is weary and weak, and I shall make him afraid, and all the people who are with him shall flee, and I shall smite the king alone. Ahithophel is very like Judas. Okay, he comes just as Judas came, and it says that it was so that the prophecy could be fulfilled. I've smitten the shepherd, and the sheep have fled. And that's exactly what we see with David here. And bring back all the people to you, when all return except the man whom you seek, and all the people should be at peace. And the saying pleased Absalom and all the elders of Israel. So this is Ahithophel's advice. Don't forget, YHVH is going to use Hushai to nullify his advice. And Hushai said to Absalom, the advice that Ahithophel has given is not good at this time. And Hushai said, you know your father and his men, that they are mighty men, and they are bitter in soul as a bear robbed of their cubs in the field. Your father is a man of battle and would not spend the night with the people. And this is interesting to me because his advice is, you know David. I think David is the picture of Messiah. You know him. And then what does he say to him? He says, your father is a man of battle and would not spend the night with the people. That's not King David. He describes somebody else to him. He says, you know him. He's like this. And this is how Absalom is led astray by Hushai's advice, because he doesn't know the name of King David. Just as people do not know the name of Yeshua and are led astray. See, by now he is hidden in some pit or in some place. This isn't King David. And it shall be when some of them fall at the first, that whoever hears it shall say, there's been a slaughter among the people who are following Absalom. And even he who is brave, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, would utterly melt. For all Israel knows that your father is a mighty man, and those who are with him are brave men. So he picks a characteristic of David that Absalom is going to be afraid of. And he makes up this characteristic of David, which is not true. And he mashes them together, and Absalom is led astray. 2 Samuel 17, 14 to 15 says, Absalom and all the men of Israel then said, the advice of Hushai the Archite is better than the advice of Ahithophel. For YHVH had ordained to nullify the good advice of Ahithophel. For the sake of David? No, for the sake of YHVH bringing evil upon Absalom. We've got to be careful when we look at events in our life and how things are turning out, that we don't think, oh, YHVH has done this for this reason, because the reasons that YHVH does things are manifold and they're intricate. All that we can do is we can make sure that we're walking right before him. Hushai then said to Zadok and to Abiathar the priests, Ahithophel has advised Absalom and the elders of Israel such and such, but I have advised so and so. Okay, so then the sons will come and inform David in the wilderness. And Ahithophel saw that his advice was not followed. This is interesting what he does here. Remember, Ahithophel, a picture of Judas. He saddled his donkey and rose up and went home to his house, to his city, and he gave charge to his house, and he hanged himself and died. It's bizarre, isn't it? Okay, he saw that his advice was not followed. This is somebody who had specifically told us that his advice was revered in the land. So this giving of advice, this position that he had seen for himself, even though he was advising against King David, when he sees that this position has gone from him, he goes home and he hangs himself and he dies. He was buried in his father's tomb. And David came to Machanaim, and Absalom passed over the Jordan, he and all the men of Israel with him. So now David is in the wilderness, and Absalom is coming out from Jerusalem. Absalom appointed Amasa over the army instead of Joab. Now Amasa was the son of a man whose name was Yithra, a Yisraelite, who had gone into Abigail, daughter of Nachash, sister of Zeruiah, Joab's mother. Remember, Abishai and Joab are sons of Zeruiah. So this is who he is to Joab. And Yisrael and Absalom encamped in the land of Gilead. And it came to be, when David had come to Machanaim, the Shovi son of Nachash from Rabbah, of the children of Ammon, and Machir son of Amiel from Lodebar, and Barzillai the Gileadite from Rogelim, brought beds, basins, earthen vessels, wheat, barley, flour, roasted grain, beans, lentils, parched, dehydrated vegetables, honey, curds, sheep, and cheese of the herd, for David and the people who were with him to eat. For they said, the people are hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. So remember, Barzillai comes with all of this rich food for David while he's in the wilderness. David sent 1/3 of the people under the hand of Joab, 1/3 under the hand of Abishai, Joab's brother, and 1/3 under the hand of Ittai. If you remember Ittai, he was the foreigner who'd only been there for a day, but he said, I will go and I will follow wherever the king leads. And the king ordered Joab and Abishai and Ittai, saying, be gentle with the young man Absalom for my sake. Okay, be gentle with him. All the people heard when the king gave the commander's orders concerning Absalom. All the people knew what David wanted to be done. David says, be gentle with him for my sake. Now, I would imagine that these people are not going to be in agreement with David. Okay, in fact, we will know for certain that Joab is not in agreement with David when he says, be gentle with him. But what are they to do? David's the king. They're to follow his orders, whether they agree with them or not. What we're going to see now is Joab killing Absalom. Okay? What's David just said to him? Be gentle with him for my sake. What does he do when he finds him? He thrusts 3 spears through his heart. When Absalom met the servants of David, Absalom was riding on a mule, and the mule went under the thick branches of a great terebinth tree, and his head caught in the terebinth tree, so his long hair actually becomes his downfall. And he was suspended between the heavens and earth, and we saw what it meant for a man to be hung on a tree, that he was accursed of Elohim before. While the mule which was under him passed on. And a certain man saw it and informed Joab and said, look, I saw Absalom hanging in a terebinth tree. And Joab said to the man who informed him, now look, you saw, and why did you not smite him to the earth there? Then I would have given you 10 pieces of silver and a belt. So what the king said, be gentle with Absalom for my sake. Kind of in one ear, out the other immediately. He's like, well, why didn't you kill him when you saw him? Obviously what we're going to do is we're going to kill him because he's a wrongin. The man answered Joab, though I were to receive 1,000 pieces of silver in my hand, like Bilam, though I was to receive all the gold and silver, I would not raise my hand against the son of the king, because in our hearing the king ordered you and Abishai and Ittai, saying, take heed, you who go against the youth, against Absalom. There's nothing that you could have done to make me go against what the king has ordered. Otherwise, I would have been untrue to my own soul, for no matter is hidden from the king, and you yourself would have set yourself against me. Okay, so again, all the way through the narrative, we see the people who respect what the king says, even though they possibly disagree with it, and then we see the people who disagree with it and go their own way and mete out justice as they see fit. And Joab said, let me not waste time here with you. And he took 3 spears in his hand and thrust them through Absalom's heart while he was still alive in the midst of the terebinth tree. And 10 young men who bore Joab's armor went around and smote Absalom and put him to death. So all of these people had heard what was to happen to Absalom, that they were to be gentle with Absalom. Joab goes out, he goes his own way, and he kills him. And then those people who are close to Joab, I presume because he was doing it, went and did exactly the same thing. And Joab blew the ram's horn, and the people returned from pursuing Israel, for Joab had held the people back. And they took Absalom and threw him into a large pit. You think about this being in terms of the judgment that Yeshua makes, okay? What happens to people who do these sort of things? They end up in the pit, in destruction, in the forest, and heaped a very large pile of stones over him. And all Israel fled, each one to his tent. And Absalom in his lifetime had taken up and set up a monument for himself, which is in the king's valley. For he said, I have no son to keep my name in remembrance. And he called the monument after his own name. And to this day, it is called Absalom's monument. So what's Absalom interested in? Okay, he's interested in making a name for himself. It doesn't matter if he's got to go against what the king has decreed. It doesn't matter if he's got to butter up the people and say, oh no, I would have judged this differently. That's not right. Not how YHVH is. What he's interested in is setting up a name for himself. Now we're going to see word come to King David, and we're going to see King David's reactions to all of these events which have transpired. And now David was sitting between the two gates. Again, he was judging. And the watchman went up to the roof over the gate to the wall and lifted his eyes and looked and saw a man running alone. So the watchman called out and told the king. And the king said, if he's alone, there is news in his mouth. And he came nearer and nearer. The word for news here is basar. It means gospel or good news. And the watchman saw another man running, and the watchman called out to the gatekeeper and said, see a man running by himself. And the king said, this one also is bringing basar. And the watchman said, I see the running of the first is like the running of Ahimaat, son of Zadok. And the king said, this is a good man, and he comes with basar, good news. And Ahimaat called out and said to the king, peace. And he bowed down with his face to the earth before the king and said, blessed be YHVH your Elohim, who has surrendered the men who raised their hand against my master the king. And it's interesting, the people who remained loyal to King David always have this attitude of mind. This is YHVH who's brought this about. This is YHVH who's brought that about. And the king said, shalom to the young man, to Absalom. And Ahimaat answered, when Joab sent the king's servant and me, your servant, I saw a great crowd, but I did not know why. And the king said, turn aside and stand here. And he turned aside and stood still. And see, the Cushite came. And the Cushite said, receive basar, my master, the king. For YHVH has avenged you this day of all those who rose against you. And the king said to the Cushite, shalom to the young man, to Absalom. And the Cushite answered, let the enemies of my master the king and all who rise against you for evil be as that young man is. And the king was shaken and went up to the room over the gate and wept. And as he went, he said this, oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son. Interesting again, isn't it? A picture of Yeshua who died the death of the body so that we don't have the second death. 2 Samuel 19, 1-7. It was reported to Joab, see, the king is weeping and mourning for Absalom. So the deliverance that day was turned into mourning for all the people. And the people heard on that day saying, the king has been grieved for his son. And the people stole back into the city that day, as people who are ashamed steal away when they flee in battle. And the king covered his face, and the king cried out with a loud voice, oh, my son, Absalom, Absalom, my son, my son. And Joab came into the house to the king and said, today you've put to shame all your servants who today have saved your life and the lives of your sons and your daughters and the lives of your wives and the lives of your concubines. Remember, this is the guy that when told to treat Absalom gently, just said, I'm going to stick him through the heart with 3 spears. By loving those who hate you. Someone else who did that. Hating those who love you. For you have made it clear today that you have neither commanders nor servants. For today I know that if Absalom had died and all of us had died today, then it would be right in your eyes. He doesn't know any of this. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Okay? But he's judged what the king says. Okay? He's judged loving those who hate you. Okay? If you try to wheel that one out, people will judge you and think that you've gone crazy. Okay? If Absalom had lived and all of us had died, it would have been right in your eyes. So what he's doing is he's looking at the judgment that the king has made. He's judging it according to whatever nonsense he's got going on in his heart. And then he's leveling this at the king. And now arise, go out and speak to the heart of your servants, for I swear by YHVH, if you do not go out, not one passes the night with you, and that is worse for you than all the evil that has come upon you from your youth until now. And Shimei, son of Gerah, remember the guy who was cursing him as he left Jerusalem and he was throwing stones? A Benjamite who was from Bahurim hastened and came down with the men of Yehudah to meet King David as he's on his way back into the city now. And he said to the king, do not let my master reckon crookedness to me, neither remember what wrong your servant did on the day that my master the king left Jerusalem, that the king should take it to heart. For I, your servant, know that I have sinned. And see, I have come today, first of all the house of Yosef, to go down to meet my master the king. So, again, we know the picture of Yeshua. Okay, he comes to him, and he's repentant, and he says, look, I've sinned. What does King David do? What Yeshua would do. He says, but Abishai, son of Zeruiah, answered, this guy who was like, let me go and cut off his head. He answers and said, should Shimei not be put to death for this, because he has cursed the anointed of YHVH? See, what Abishai is doing isn't a problem. Okay, he thinks that what David is ruling is wrong. So what does he do? He comes to him and he says, wait there, what's the score? Should this not be the other way? But he doesn't go against him. He doesn't then go and kill Shimei just because he thinks that's the way that it should be done. And David said, what have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah, that you are to be adversaries to me today, satans to me, satanim, satans? Should any man be put to death in Israel today? For do I not know that I am king over Israel today? So the king said to Shimei, you do not die. And the king swore to him. Okay, so he decides, I'm going to forgive this man against the advice of what Abishai has said to him. But Abishai goes along with what the king says. And Mephibosheth, son of Shaul, came down to meet the king. Okay, this is the guy who ate at the table of the sons of the king, who was lame in his feet, whose servant Siva he'd met. His servant had had all of this stuff for David, and he said, oh, Mephibosheth, he's staying in Jerusalem because he thinks that the kingdom is going to be returned to him. And he had not attended to his feet, nor trimmed his mustache, nor washed his garments from the day the king went away until the day he came back in peace. Okay, so this is the appearance of a mourner, if you like, or somebody who is repentant in the picture of this as Yeshua. And it came to be when he had come to Jerusalem to meet the king, that the king said to him, why did you not go with me, Mephibosheth? And he answered, my master, O king, my servant deceived me. For your servant said, I'm saddling a donkey for myself to ride on it and go to the king, because your servant is lame. Okay, so David knows that this is actually what took place. So this judgment that David's going to have in a second is actually a little bit more complicated than it looks at first. Siva told David something that is not true about Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth says that he lied about something that David knows to be true. And he spoke slander against your servant to my master the king. But my master the king is an angel of Elohim. Therefore, do what is good in your eyes. Okay, different reaction, isn't it? No, you are in this position. You do what is good in your eyes because of the good you've already done for me. For all of my father's house were but dead men before my master the king. Yet you set your servant among those who eat at your own table. Obvious picture here. Okay, those who were dead in their sins. You set your servant among those who eat at your own table. Therefore, what right have I to still cry out to any more to the king? And the king said to him, why do you speak any more of your matters? I have said, you and Siva share the land. Now, he doesn't complain at this point. He doesn't say, but Siva deceived me, and he said that he was going to come to you with the donkey and stuff, and he didn't do it. He doesn't do any of that. He just leaves it with the king. And the king's got information that he hasn't got. So it's the right thing to do. Anyway, 2 Samuel 19. Now we've got Barzillai the Gileadite. He came down from Rogelim. He's one of the ones who came to him when he was at Machanaim with all of the parched vegetables and the roasted vegetables, the wheat and the barley and the flour and all the rest of it. And passed over the Yarden with the king to send him on his way over the Yarden. And Barzillai was a very aged man, 80 years old, and he had sustained the king when he was dwelling at Machanaim, for he was a very rich man. And the king said to Barzillai, pass over with me, and I shall provide for you with me in Jerusalem. And in the picture of Yeshua, okay, somebody who has served the king is then invited to cross over the Yarden, just as Yeshua is going to cross over the Yarden and bring us all into the land of Israel. And I want you to recognize in this that these characters that we see through this, and we're going to look at these characters from Yeshua's perspective to finish in a second. But these characters, we're going to see them repeat throughout history. Okay, we're even going to see Absalom's character repeat within this same narrative. Okay, but what we're not going to see is all of these characters fitting together in exactly the same way. We're not going to see exactly the same situation, but we're going to see these same characters. So this guy, the prophetic picture being Yeshua crossing over the Yarden, he says to the king, how many are the days of my life that I should go up with the king to Jerusalem? I'm now 80 years old. Do I discern between the good and the evil? Does your servant taste what I eat or drink? Do I still hear the voice of singing men and singing women? Why then should your servant be a further burden to my master the king? Obviously in the picture, you'd be like, we're going to Israel. That's amazing. Of course I'll come. Your servant would only pass over the Yarden with the king for a short distance. And why should the king repay me with such a reward? I'm sure that would be our response. Please let your servant turn back again to die in my own city near the burying place of my father and mother. But here is your servant Kimham. Let him pass over with my master the king. Do for him what is good in your eyes. And the king passed over to Gilgal, and Kimham passed over with him. And all the people of Yehudah brought the king over, and also half the people of Israel. This is interesting to me. When David leaves his house, he leaves 10 concubines in his house. What do we see when we see Yeshua returning? There's the 10 virgins, aren't there? Okay, 10 tribes of Israel. How many of the virgins make it? Half of them. So we've got half of the people of Israel and all the people of Yehudah who will not come in until they're made jealous by the house of Israel. And see, all the men of Israel were coming to the king, and they said to the king, why have our brothers, the men of Yehudah, stolen you away, being a picture of Yeshua, and brought the king and all his household and all David's men with him over the Yarden? And all the men of Yehudah answered the men of Israel and said, because the king's our relative. And why are you displeased over this, master? Have we all eaten at the king's cost, or has he given us any gift? And the men of Israel answered the men of Yehudah and said, we have 10 parts in the king, and in David too. We have more than you. Why then did you despise us? Was it not our advice first to bring back the king? Now what this reminds me of is the parable of the workers. Okay? The ones who were there at first, they received their wages. And they were upset when the ones who had come at the end got the same wages as them. I wonder whether this is a picture of that. All of the people of Yehudah who come in at the end, who went there first, all the men of Israel are like, we were here first. Why have you taken the king away? And he said, because he's our relative. It's interesting to me. Now what we're going to see is the end of David's life. This will draw the whole thing to a close. Because what we've seen in Shimei is we've seen him given mercy. We've seen him given grace. Okay? But the end of Shimei's life is very interesting to me. Adonijah, son of Haggith, exalted himself, saying, I reign. And he prepared for himself a chariot, a horseman, 50 men to run before him. Does that sound familiar? Exactly the same as Absalom did. Now his father had not worried him at any time by saying, why have you done so? He was also very good looking, and he was born after Absalom. Okay, so we're going to see these characters repeat throughout history. Okay, the picture that we have here, this is David. He's about to pass the throne to Shlomo. This is what Adonijah has risen up against. The king is going to die, the human king, but Shlomo, in certain aspects, is going to continue to be a picture of Mashiach. Absalom's dead at this point, but now we've got this guy rises up, who's born after Absalom. He talked with Joab, son of Zeruiah, and with Abiathar the priest, and they supported Adonijah. Okay, so Joab, the one who wasn't prepared to listen to what the king had to say, he stuck with him while he was in the wilderness, but then when he's told to do something that he just doesn't quite get, treat Absalom gently, he doesn't do it, and he kills him, and now he finds himself involved in the next rebellion. And Nathan said, "Oh, my master, O king, have you said, Adonijah shall reign after me, and he shall sit on my throne? For he has gone down today and has offered great numbers of bulls and fatlings and sheep, and has invited all the king's sons and the commanders of the army and Abiathar the priest. And look, they're eating and drinking before him. And they say, let King Adonijah live. But he has not invited me, your servant, nor Zadok the priest, nor Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, nor your servant Shlomo." So those who were loyal to the king, they weren't invited to the rebellion. 1 Kings 1:38-40. Then Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet. Okay, these are the people who are loyal to King David. And Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and the Kerethites and the Pelethites went down and had Shlomo ride on King David's mule and took him to Gihon. And you're going to recognize some elements here from when Yeshua entered into Jerusalem. And Zadok the priest took a horn of oil from the tent and anointed Shlomo. And they blew the horn, and all the people said, "Let King Shlomo live." So now he is the anointed of Yehovah. He is, in the Hebrew, he is the Mashiach of Yehovah. And all the people came up after him, and the people played the flutes and rejoiced with great joy, so that the earth was split by their noise. So this is the one whom David has decided should be king. And all the guests who were invited by Adonijah were afraid and rose, and each one went his way. And Adonijah was afraid of Shlomo and rose and went and took hold of the horns of the altar. And it was reported to Shlomo, saying, "Look, Adonijah is afraid of King Shlomo. And look, he has taken hold of the horns of the altar, saying, let King Shlomo swear to me today that he does not put his servant to death with the sword." And in the picture of Messiah, this reminds me very much of those who grasp onto the idea of once saved, always saved. No, we've been made holy now. That's what grabbing hold of the horns of the altar were. "Let King Shlomo swear to me today that he does not put his servant to death with the sword." And Shlomo said, "If he proves himself a worthy man, not one hair of him is going to fall to the earth. But if evil is found in him, then he shall die." This is exactly what Yeshua would say to those people. 1 Kings 2. "And also, you know what Joab, son of Zeruiah, did to me." So this now is David's advice to Shlomo. Okay? "You know what Joab, son of Zeruiah, did to me, and what he did to the two commanders of the armies of Israel, to Abner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Yether, that he slew them and shed the blood of battle in peace, and put the blood of battle on his belt that was around his waist, the belt of truth, and on his sandals that were on his feet shod with the gospel of peace. So act according to your wisdom, and do not let his gray hair go down to Sheol in peace." So he says, this guy, I made the judgment. I told him to not kill Absalom. He killed Absalom. You know what he did. Don't let him go down to Sheol in peace. But show kindness to the sons of Barzillai, the Gileadite, the one who served the king in the wilderness. Let them be among those who eat at your table. For so they came to me when I fled from Absalom, your brother. And see, with you is Shimei, son of Gerah. Okay, the guy that he'd forgiven. He came and said, I've sinned. The Benjamite from Bachurim, who cursed me with a grievous cursing in the day when I went to Machanaim. But he came down to meet me at the Yarden, and I swore to him by YHVH, saying, I shall not put you to death with the sword. What does he say? And now do not leave him unpunished, for you're a wise man and know what you should do to him, and shall bring his hair down to Sheol with blood. This is the final judgment. Yes, he was forgiven by the king. Okay, but this is where he ends up. So, from the prophetic perspective, Messiah's enemies, Absalom, does not agree with the king, so takes matters into his own hands according to what he believes is right, captures the hearts of the people of Israel by telling them that they are right in their particular issues and that he would judge favorably if they were to make him judge. He rebels against YHVH's anointed, and he's ultimately destroyed. Ahithophel, whilst previously a friend of Messiah, will go along with the rebellion and is ultimately destroyed. Shimei is forgiven, but goes on to disobey the king. Shlomo says, okay, I won't kill you, but you've got to remain in Jerusalem. If you leave Jerusalem, that's it, you're dead. So that's Shlomo's wisdom in it. He ends up ultimately destroyed because he disobeys the king. Adonijah, he tries to seize control of the kingdom because he doesn't like the one whom Messiah has appointed. Okay, he doesn't like the one that David appointed, King Shlomo. Well, ultimately, he's destroyed. Messiah's friends, Mephibosheth, he remains faithful to Messiah regardless of how it is outwardly perceived, and is ultimately honored. So these lies have been told about him, and it looks bad for him, but he remains faithful. He's ultimately honored, as is Hushai. Barzillai is ultimately honored as well. We saw that. Messiah's commanders, Yoav, serves Messiah, but eventually rebels and is ultimately destroyed. And it's so sad that so many people are in this position. You think, wow, that person's not going to fall. And they serve them all the way, and then they rebel, and they're ultimately destroyed. Ittai is ultimately honored. You can read about him in 2 Samuel 23. Abishai is ultimately honored. Might be him in 2 Samuel 23, I can't remember. You can search these names and find out what actually happened to them. But through this story, we can see the nuances of what happens when the king makes a decree. And it might be right and it might be wrong. But what YHVH has said is to follow that decree as if you're serving him. That's what we should take from it. Thank you for being patient. I've no idea how long that part was, but it was really long, I could tell that. We'll come back in the third part and we'll look at how kings are to be in trusting in YHVH and therefore how we are to be. So, verse 14 is where we're up to. It says, when you come to the land which YHVH your Elohim is giving you, and shall possess it and shall dwell in, and you shall say, let me set a king over me, like all of the Gentiles that are around me, you shall certainly set a king over you, whom YHVH your Elohim chooses. And this very much fits in with the theme that comes throughout this Torah portion about people who are in authority are to be the ones whom YHVH has chosen, because there are many who want to take authority upon themselves, and YHVH will use all of those things for his own glory. But the ones that you want to follow are the ones whom YHVH has chosen, and we should have discernment to know those people. Set a king over you from among your brothers. You're not allowed to set a foreigner over you who is not your brother. So somebody who is a native-born Israelite. Now we're going to see some interesting things that the king has to follow. Some Torah which is only applicable to a king. So great example of some of the Torah that Yeshua couldn't have fulfilled when he came and walked the earth. Okay, he was metaphorically a king, or he's king over his kingdom. But these commands he couldn't have fulfilled as a human man when he walked the earth. Only he is not to increase horses for himself, nor cause the people to return to Mitzrayim to increase horses. So Yeshua wasn't going about the place thinking, oh, I better not get too many horses for myself, because he wasn't a human king on the earth. For YHVH has said to you, do not return that way again. And he is not to increase wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor is he to greatly increase silver and gold for himself. So kings could not have a load of wives. Okay, in the New Testament we have the admonition for people who are in spiritual leadership to not have more than one wife. And I've had people say to me before, what about King David? King David had more than one wife. Well, yeah, he might have been in sin, and also he wasn't in spiritual leadership over the people. He wasn't a spiritual guide or a spiritual counselor of the people. But the reason that the kings aren't to do these things are interesting, and the reasons for these laws are applicable to us, even if the laws directly are not. So he's not to increase horses for himself. He's not to increase silver and gold to himself either. 1 Kings 10:26-29 says, and Shlomo gathered chariots and horsemen, and he had 1,400 chariots, 12,000 horsemen, whom he stationed in the chariot cities and with the king in Jerusalem. And the king made silver as common as in Jerusalem as stones, and he made cedars as plenty as the sycamores, which are in the low country. Now YHVH gave him this wealth, so that's not a transgression of the command. Okay, he didn't gain silver for himself, but he did surround himself with military might, with horsemen. Shlomo had horses brought out from Mitzrayim. That is directly in contravention of the command. So you don't have a load of horses so as to not cause the people to go back to Mitzrayim. And Ku'ay, the king's merchants brought them in Ku'ay at a price. And a chariot came up and went out from Mitzrayim for 600 pieces of silver, and a horse 150. And so by their hand they brought them out to all the kings of the Hittites and the kings of Aram. So Solomon gained this mighty army for himself. And the problem in the king doing these things, in gaining wealth for himself, not wealth that YHVH has given to him, and horses and chariots for himself, is that dependence becomes to be on those things. It comes to be on those things rather than in YHVH. If YHVH wanted to destroy Solomon, it wouldn't matter how many horses and how many chariots Solomon had. All that would matter is that he was in right standing before YHVH. Isaiah 2:6-8 says, for you have forsaken your people, the house of Yaakov, because they have been filled from the east and practiced magic like the Philistines, and they are pleased with the children of foreigners. And their land is filled with silver and gold. There's no end to their treasures. Their land is filled with horses. There's no end to their chariots. And their land is filled with idols. They bow themselves to the work of their own hands, to what their own fingers have made. And this is something that we need to be careful about. Okay, that our dependence, our trust is in YHVH's name. Okay, if our trust comes to be from means of security that we can gather around ourselves and we think, now I'm secure. I'm secure now that I've got all these horses and chariots. I'm secure now that I've got all this silver and gold, but I wasn't secure before, then we're not trusting in YHVH's name. And I think people wonder sometimes, why is it that YHVH is not doing these things which he has promised? Okay, why is it that I don't have this money or whatever it is, whatever the modern equivalent of horses and chariots and things to be secure are? They think, I go along to church, I do the commandments, surely I should be blessed. But their trust is not in YHVH's name. Okay, those things come from trusting in his name. But if you look at the money, and that's where you get your security, your sense of security from, you're trusting in that rather than in his name. And it's trusting in his name which is the root of why you do the commandments. Just doing the commandments isn't going to profit you, I think. Doing the commandments because you trust in his name, that will profit you something. Okay, you will be looked after, provided for by YHVH if you trust in his name. But if you're not doing the commandments because you trust in his name, you're doing it for provision or for whatever other thing, or when it comes to an aspect that you are tested in, you decide, no, I'm not going to trust in his name in that, then you haven't done the very basic first thing, which is trust in his name, from which all the other things stem. So the kings weren't to do this. They weren't to trust in silver and gold. They weren't to trust in horses and chariots or whatever things of this world. Isaiah 31, 1-3 says, "Woe to those who go down to Mitzrayim for help and rely on horses, who trust in chariots because they are many, and in horsemen because they're very strong, but who do not look to the set apart one of Yisrael, nor seek Yahovah." Okay, it's fine to have things in the world. That's not a problem. But they need to be derived from that trusting in Yahovah's name, not I will trust in the things of the world whilst trusting in his name, because those two things are actually incompatible. If you're doing the commandments, but you're trusting in the things of the world, you're not trusting in his name. Verse 2 says, "And he also is wise and has brought evil and has not turned aside his words. And he shall rise up against the house of evildoers and against the help of workers of wickedness. And the Mitzrites are men and not ale, and their horses are flesh and not spirit. And when Yahovah stretches out his hand, both he who helps shall stumble, and he who is helped shall fall." So even in the case where you're looking to somebody, an external body, Mitzrayim, Egypt, for your help, and you're thinking, wow, in this aspect, I'm not obeying Yahovah, but I'm going to be fine because I've gathered all of this stuff around me. If that help comes from somewhere else, Yahovah is saying, in that situation, the help will fall. Those who are helping you will fall, and the one who is helped will fall. You're not going to make it any different. Okay, all you're actually doing in that situation is making it so that the one who's helping you will also be in a worse position. You can't go against the will of Yahovah and gather enough around you to be secure unless your trust is in him from the beginning. Psalm 20 verse 7 says, "Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we remember the name of Yahovah or Elohim." That's the point where everyone must begin. Following the commandments won't profit you, I think, if it's not from trusting in his name. Yahovah provides for those who trust in his name. If you don't trust in his name, you won't be one of the ones whom he will provide for. Jeremiah 17, 11-15 says, "And the word of Yahovah came to me, saying, please say to the rebellious house, do you not know what these mean? See, the king of Babel came to Jerusalem and took its king and heads and brought them with him to Babel." Okay, the strong men of Yehudah, he brought them with him to Babel. He took one of the royal seed and made a covenant with him and put him under oath, and he took away the mighty of the land, so that the kingdom would be brought low and not lift itself up, but guard his covenant that it might stand. But he rebelled against him by sending his messengers to Mitzrayim to give him horses and many people. Shall he thrive? He's gone to Mitzrayim. He's going to get all this stuff. He's got all this stuff now that he can rely on. He's got all this security around him. But what will it profit him? Is he going to thrive if Yahovah says that he is not to thrive? No, Yahovah has said that he's not to thrive, and none of that will profit him whatsoever. The only thing that will profit us is trusting in his name, and from that flows everything else. Psalm 33, 13-22 says, "Yahovah has looked from the heavens, he has seen all the sons of men. He looked from his dwelling place on all the inhabitants of the earth. He who fashions the hearts of them all, he who understands all their works. The king is not saved by the multitude of an army. A mighty man is not delivered by great strength." You can look at those things and you say, wow, look at that incredibly powerful army that country's got. They're going to be fine. Well, Yehovah is going to bring some kind of misfortune upon them. Misfortune's the wrong word. He's going to bring some kind of curse upon them. How will that be? Their huge army is going to save them in the day that Yehovah wishes to curse them. A mighty man's not delivered by his great strength. Okay, look at Charlie. He's massive. Who's ever going to mess with Charlie? Okay. If Yahovah wasn't with him and Yahovah decided Charlie is going to be smitten by this tiny little fella, then he would be. A horse is a vain means of safety. Neither does it rescue any by its great power. We have a tendency to look at these things in the world, and we think that we need to go to them in order for things to be okay, for whatever situation we have in our lives to be worked out. But none of those provide the deliverance. See, the eye of Yehovah is on those fearing him, on those waiting for his kindness, to deliver their soul from death and to keep them alive during the scarcity of food. Okay, during famine, he will keep alive those who fear him. Not going to tell us how he's going to do it. We can't possibly imagine. We can build up all the food that we want, but if Yehovah wishes for us to not have any food during that period of time, we won't have any food, and there's nothing in the world that we can possibly do to stop ourselves being in that position apart from to trust in his name. And it's not trusting in his name which leads people to go to these other sources of security. You want the security from that thing. In doing so, that is sin against Yehovah, because you're not trusting in his name. Verse 20 says, our soul is longed for Yehovah, our help and our shield is he. For our heart does rejoice in him, for we have put our trust in his set apart name, in his character and who he is. That's what you trust in. That's where everything, all of your security comes from. Let your kindness, O Yehovah, be upon us, even as we wait for you. A wrong man hardens his face, but as for the straight, he establishes his way. There is no wisdom or understanding or counsel against Yehovah. It doesn't matter. You could build up for yourself the most amazing kingdom in the world, the most amazing armies with all of the modern horses and chariots, all of the tanks, whatever you want, all the missiles that you want. But nothing can come against the counsel of Yehovah, the way that he will make things to be. The horse is prepared for the day of battle, but the deliverance is of Yehovah. You can prepare all those things and be like, look, we're going to be ready. If Yehovah brings an army from the north, we're going to be ready. We've got all the horses, all of the chariots. Nothing is going to take away our security, our peace and security from us. The deliverance is of Yehovah. The curse is of Yehovah, though. Verse 18 says, it shall be when he sits on the throne of his kingdom that he shall write for himself a copy of this Torah in a book from the one before the priests, the Levites. So how did Yehovah have it? How did he institute it? How were things meant to be in the beginning when he put all these things in place? The copy of the Torah was before the priests and the Levites. The people would hear it from the Levites who were nearby to them, and they'd hear it once a year at Sukkot. Because what do you need to know? Walk righteously, love your neighbor. How do you do that? What are the instructions? You can learn those very, very simply. The king was the other person who was to have a copy of the Torah. Now, I'm not saying that people shouldn't have copies of the scriptures, or that it's a terrible thing, or anything that people might misunderstand me to be saying. What I'm saying is this is not how it was originally meant to be. It's meant to be easy to understand. It's meant to be easy to disseminate to somebody. The reason that the king had a copy is something that Yehovah can use the fact that now everybody is in a different position to accommodate or to achieve. It says, it shall be with him, he shall read it all the days of his life, so that he learns to fear Yehovah as Elohim, guard all the words of this Torah and these laws to do them. And people can do that now. So that his heart is not lifted up above his brothers, and so as not to turn aside from the command right or left, so that he prolongs his days in the kingdom, he and his children in the midst of Israel. This is the Torah. This is the law of Elohim. He is to understand, he's to write himself a copy, and he's to understand it so that he can rightly rule the kingdom like the priests and the Levites were to do justice according to what Yehovah had said. But as I say, the people were never meant to have their own copies of the scriptures. And I would suggest that it has actually caused massive amounts of confusion among people. Yehovah gives us his scriptures, and he gives us his body and the people in the body through which those scriptures are interpreted. That's the way that it always was. So for people online, you can hit the dislike button now. Deuteronomy 18 verse 1. Okay, the priests, the Levites, all the tribe of Levi have no part nor inheritance with Israel. They're to eat the offerings of Yehovah made by fire and his inheritance. But among his brothers, Levi has no inheritance. Yehovah is his inheritance, and he has spoken to him. Okay, so it's almost like, or it appears to me, like the Levites were to trust in Yehovah for everything, that Yehovah was their inheritance, and that was the example that they showed to the people. Verse 3 says, and this is the priest's right from the people, from those who bring an offering, whether it is bull or sheep, that they give to the priest the shoulder, the 2 cheeks, and the stomach. The first fruits of your grain, your new wine, your oil, the first of the fleece of your sheep, you give to him. And we've looked before at how we can give to the priest. Now we can give to Yeshua by giving to the least of the brethren. So if people are sheep farmers, maybe give the first fleece of your sheep to the least of the brethren. Or if you're growing produce, maybe provide for the least of the brethren in that way. For Yehovah your Elohim has chosen him out of all your tribes to stand to serve in the name of Yehovah, him and his sons forever. And again, we've got this theme going through. Yehovah has chosen him to stand and serve. Okay, and these would be the judges, the people would go to when they had matters that they needed clearing up. And when the Levite comes from one of your gates, from where he is sojourned among all Israel, and shall come with all the desire of his soul to the place which Yehovah chooses. So he comes with all of his stuff, everything that he wants. Then he shall serve in the name of Yehovah his Elohim, like all his brothers the Levites who are standing there before Yehovah. They are to have portion to eat, besides what comes from the sale of his inheritance. What? His inheritance? Levi's to have no inheritance. He will have what comes from the sale of his inheritance. It's a different word. I go into it in future, but it's a different word. It's basically patrimony from his lineage or something like that. When you come into the land which Yehovah your Elohim is giving you, do not learn to do according to the abominations of those Gentiles. Let no one be found among you who makes a son or daughter pass through the fire, or who practices divination, or a user of magic, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who conjures spells, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. For whoever does these are an abomination to Yehovah. Because of these abominations, Yehovah your Elohim drives them out from before you. Now we're going to see when Yehovah gives instructions about what to do when you come to cities that are far from you, that you're to offer them terms of peace. And if they don't accept, then you do one thing. If they do accept, you do another. But I want to address this because people have in their heads the idea that Yehovah, when he sent all the Israelites to the land of Canaan, the reason that he was doing it was because they were all Nephilim. Go and wipe them out. They're all Nephilim. He tells us in numerous places throughout the scriptures why he does it, because they were wicked, because of these abominations. That's why Elohim drives them out from before you. It's interesting to me that the very next verse says, be tamim before Yehovah your Elohim. People who are of this mindset and think that Yehovah was driving out the Nephilim also believe that when it says that Noah was perfect in his generations, it meant that he had no Nephilim genetics. Well, here we're told to be the exact same word, be complete, or be tamim before Yehovah your Elohim. It's interesting to me that it follows on from the verse that says, this is the reason why I'm driving out these people from the land of Canaan. For these nations whom you are possessing do listen to those using magic and to diviners. But as for you, Yehovah your Elohim has not appointed such for you. Yehovah your Elohim shall raise up for you a prophet like me from your midst, from your brothers. Listen to him. Now, this prophet, we know that this is speaking of Yeshua. We have in John 1, we found him whom Moshe in the Torah and the prophets did right. Okay, this was speaking of Yeshua. That is an interesting thing, but an interesting thing that stuck out to me as I was reading through this is the reason why Yehovah sent Yeshua as the prophet. Why did he send Yeshua as the prophet? Prophet like me from your midst, from your brothers, listen to him. according to all that you asked of Yehovah your Elohim in Horeb. So the reason that he sent Yeshua was because of what they asked in Horeb, in the day of the assembly, saying, let me not hear again the voice of Yehovah my Elohim, nor let me see this great fire anymore, lest I die. So it's because of them asking that he sends him. Yehovah said to me, what they have spoken is good, and that's all that we get in the account in the book of Exodus. I shall raise up for them a prophet like you out of the midst of their brothers, and I shall put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. That's the bit that we don't get in Exodus, and that's why he sent Yeshua. I mean, among myriad other reasons why Yeshua was sent and the things he achieved, but it was as a response to what they've said when they said, we don't want to hear from the mountain. We don't want to hear your voice. We don't want to see the fire. He says, okay, what they've spoken is good. I'll send them Yeshua. John 14, 1-9 says, let not your heart be troubled. Believe in Elohim. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many staying places, or mansions. It's difficult to translate that word. And if not, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I shall come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, you might be too. And where I go, you know, and the way, you know. Thomas said to him, Master, we do not know where you're going, or how are we able to know the way? What Yeshua is coming and telling them is exactly what Yehovah on the mountain, when he came down in that manifestation, was to tell them the way to the Father. Yeshua said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. He was the Word made flesh. You want to get to the Father? You must follow the way, the truth, and the life. If you had known me, you would have known my Father too. From now on, you know him and have seen. Philip said to him, Master, show us the Father, and it is enough for us. Okay, again, remember why Yeshua was sent, or one of the reasons was because they didn't want to see him on the mountain. They didn't want to hear his voice and see the great fire. And they're saying, show us the Father, and it's enough for us. Yeshua said to him, have I been with you so long, and you've not known me, Philip? He who has seen me has seen the Father. And how do you say, show us the Father? So he comes down on the mountain, and they're all terrified of him. So he comes again in another form, and still they don't want to hear his voice. John 15:19 says, therefore Yeshua responded and said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, the Son is able to do none at all by himself, but only that which he sees the Father doing. Because whatever he does, the Son also likewise does. You don't see the similarity, do you? You don't see the similarity between what was happening on the mountain and him telling them and instructing them in the word, the way by which they should get to the Father. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Okay, it's the same thing. I've just come in another form. I'm telling you exactly the same thing. Deuteronomy 18:19, and it shall be the man who does not listen to my words, which he speaks in my name, I require it of him. Okay, Yeshua said, didn't he? He said, look, I didn't come to judge anyone. I came to give them the words of everlasting life. They hear me, all well and good. They don't hear me, the word that I speak, that's what's going to judge them in the last day. Paraphrasing, of course. Does not listen to my words which he speaks, I require it of him. But the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other gods, even that prophet shall die. When you say in your heart, we've seen this in recent Torah portions, that people are going to have reactions immediately in their heart. They're going to say things in their heart. And then Yehovah says, this is the response that you're to have to the thoughts that arise in your heart. When you say in your heart, how do we know the word which Yehovah has not spoken? When the prophet speaks in the name of Yehovah and the word is not, or comes not, that is the word which Yehovah has not spoken. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously. Do not be afraid of him. When Yehovah your Elohim cuts off the nations whose land Yehovah your Elohim is giving you, and you dispossess them and dwell in their cities and in their houses, separate 3 cities for yourself in the midst of the land which Yehovah your Elohim is giving you to possess. Prepare a way for yourself. Divide into 3 parts the border of your land which Yehovah your Elohim is giving you to inherit. Now, I'm not going to go into these cities of refuge. We kind of glanced at them when we looked at the issue with Absalom. But I put this up on the channel recently. If anybody wants to understand what these cities of refuge were and what situations they were to deal with, I'd recommend just going and looking at this teaching. If Yehovah your Elohim enlarges your border, this is interesting to me. If he enlarges your border, you're going to go into the land. If he enlarges your border as he swore to your fathers and has given you the land, he swore to Abraham, and has given you the land which he promised to give to your fathers, okay? Because the land that was promised is not the land that they received. Okay? The land that they received was within those boundaries, but the boundaries were much larger as described. When you guard all this command to do it, which I'm commanding you today, to love Yehovah your Elohim, to walk in his ways all the days, then you shall add 3 more cities for yourself besides these 3. So in the millennial kingdom, we will not have 6 cities of refuge. We'll have 9 when he expands those borders. So the innocent blood is not shed in the midst of your land. Again, this idea of the land being defiled by blood being shed. Okay, if somebody's blood is shed by accident, something has to be done in order to accommodate that. And that's what these cities of refuge are for. But when anyone hates his neighbor and shall lie in wait for him, and rise against him, shall smite the life from him so that he dies, then he shall flee to one of these cities. Then the elders of the city shall send and bring him from there, and give him into the hand of the revenger of blood, and he shall die. Your eyes shall not pardon him, but you shall purge the blood of innocent blood from Israel, so that it might be well with you. So in this case, when somebody's fled to a city and they have no right being there, they actually killed somebody, then you take him from there. Your eye does not pity him. You do not spare him. You kill him. You'll purge the blood of innocent blood from Israel. Verse 14 says, do not remove your neighbor's boundary, which those in the past have set in your inheritance. Okay, so they have those things when it was all drawn by lot, don't they? They have the various areas of the land drawn by lot. They're not to change the boundary. In the 50th year, it returns to the people to whom it belongs. One witness does not rise up against a man concerning any crookedness or sin that he commits. At the mouth of 2 witnesses or at the mouth of 3 witnesses, a matter is established. So if anybody ever tells you that somebody has sinned and they are the only witness as to it, you're not to believe them, okay? Has to be in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, which is why Matthew 18, what happens? Somebody sins. You go and speak to them between you and them alone, okay? Then, if they don't hear you, you go with 2 or 3, so that the matter is established in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, so that it can then be believed. When a malicious witness rises up against any man to accuse him of turning aside, both men who have the dispute shall stand before Yehovah, before the priests and the judges who serve in those days. What's the last part of Matthew 18? You bring them to the assembly, to the leadership, and they will judge the matter. We had then an issue where somebody brought, if you don't mind me saying, brought a false accusation against Mel, and we had to have a meeting and sort out the situation. And it's interesting, actually. This Torah portion's had me thinking about those sort of things. But we came to a decision on it. They weren't happy. They went away in a big, they just weren't happy about it. And then they end up leaving the fellowship. But these are the instructions that we're to follow in those cases. Okay, when there is a matter of strife between plea and plea, between 2 people who come and they both got some kind of grievance with the other, or one person's got a grievance with the other person, you don't believe it at the mouth of 1 witness. Okay, at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, a matter is established, and then whether or not it has taken place is in the hands of the leadership, and their decision is to be respected. Verse 18 says, and the judges shall diligently search and see if the witness is a false witness who has falsely accused his brother. Then you shall do to him as he thought to have done to his brother. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. And let the rest hear and fear, and never again do this evil matter in your midst. So if somebody comes against somebody else, not only do they have to be the ones that are inflicting the punishment, not only do there have to be 2 or 3 witnesses in that case, but also they have to accept, and all the witnesses have to accept, if they come to witness against somebody and the matter is not true, whatever the punishment was for that will be done to the person coming as a witness. There's all of these things built in to the idea of the death penalty and all of those sort of things that people misunderstand in YHVH's Torah. Let your eye not pardon, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. When you go out to battle against your enemies and shall see horses and chariots and people more numerous than you, do not be afraid of them. For YHVH your Elohim, who brought you up from the land of Mitzrayim, is with you. Now this is really interesting. Okay, I've compared this before to areas in our lives when we come up against something and we've got to overcome it, and we're like, no, I don't know how I'm going to overcome this thing. It seems like it's stronger than I am, or whatever it is. It says, it shall be when you draw near to the battle that the priest shall come and speak to the people. Shall say to them, hear, O Yisrael, Shema Yisrael, you are drawing near today to battle with your enemies. Do not let your heart faint. Do not fear or tremble or be afraid before them. For YHVH your Elohim, he is he who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies to save you. It's interesting, isn't it? If you think about that in the context of us coming up against things that we need to overcome in our lives. Our heart might be fearful before them. But then what is the remedy that YHVH offers? The priest comes and says to the people, don't be afraid. And he reminds them of all the things. He reminds them that it's YHVH your Elohim who's with you. Don't fear or tremble or be afraid or let your heart faint. The officers, the Shoftim, shall speak to the people, saying, who is the man who has built a new house and has not dedicated it? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in battle, and another man dedicate it. And who is the man who has planted the vineyard and has not begun to use it? Let him also go and return to his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man should begin to use it. And who is the man who is engaged to a woman and has not taken her? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man take her. And what I point out at this point, I'm aware that some people think that this is a reason why Yeshua has to abide with his bride for a year before he can come and smite the nations. They'll say, Yeshua has a new house. He's not dedicated it. He's planted the vineyard, us, and he's not begun to use it. He is engaged to a woman, us, the bride, and he's not taken her. But what I want to point out is that cannot be true. Okay, we don't have to abide with Yeshua for a year or anything like that, because the reason given for all of these commands is lest he dies in the battle. Lest he dies in the battle. That's not going to apply to Yeshua. Yeshua's not going to die in the battle. It's not like Yeshua has to follow this Torah commandment lest he dies in the battle. We have to understand the context to these things. Further, it says, the officers shall speak further to the people and say, who is the man who is afraid and tender of heart? Let him go and return to his house, lest the heart of his brothers fail like his heart. Is this something we're going to apply to Yeshua as well? Who is the man who is afraid and tender of heart? Oh yeah, it's Yeshua. You better go and abide with this bride. And it shall be, when the officers have finished speaking to the people, that they shall appoint commanders of the divisions to lead the people. When you draw near to a city to fight against it, then you shall make a call for peace to it. And it shall be that if it accepts your call to peace and shall open to you, then all the people found in it are to be your tributaries and subjects. But if it does not make peace with you and shall fight against you, then you shall besiege it. And YHVH your Elohim shall give it into your hands, and you shall smite every male in it with the edge of the sword. Only the women and the little ones and the livestock and all that is in every city, all its spoil, you take as plunder for yourselves. And you eat the enemy's plunder, which YHVH your Elohim gives you. Okay, so this is a command that is given not to the cities when they go in to the land of Canaan. Okay, this is other wars that they have. They're to offer peace first. To the people in the land of Canaan, though, it's different. Do so to all the cities which are very far from you, which are not of the cities of these nations. Only of the cities of these people which Yehovah your Elohim gives you as an inheritance, you do not keep alive any that breathe. As we've seen, not because they're all Nephilim and we need to wipe them all out. We don't need to make excuses for Yehovah. You shall certainly put them under the ban, the Hittite and the Amorite and the Canaanite and the Perizzite and the Hivite and the Jebusite, as Yehovah your Elohim has commanded you, lest they teach you to do according to all their abominations which they have done for their gods, and you sin against Yehovah your Elohim. Why did he want them destroyed? That's why. We don't need to make these excuses for him. Exodus 23, 31 to 33 shows us what happens when people, again, Yehovah's made the judgment. Just like David said, be gentle to Absalom. What happens when you disagree with the king and you think, oh no, I've got a better way of doing this. I've got a better way of dealing with it. Yehovah said, I shall set your border from the Sea of Reeds to the Sea of Philistines, and from the wilderness to the river, for I shall give the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and you shall drive them out before you. Do not make a covenant with them, nor with their gods. Let them not dwell in your land, lest they make you sin against me when you serve their gods, when it becomes a snare to you. So it's kind of the opposite of what David's saying. David was saying, be gentle to Absalom. Disagreement with him causes the trouble that we saw. Here, Yehovah is saying, don't show pity to them. Don't make a covenant with them. Don't have them living in your land. Okay, it might seem like a good thing for you to do. Don't do it, though. Joshua 9, 11 to 15 says, so our elders and all the inhabitants of our land spoke to us, saying, take food with you for the journey and go to meet them and say to them, we are your servants, and now make a covenant with us. This bread of ours we took hot for our provision from the houses on the day that we left to come to you. But now, see, it is dry and it is crumbly. And these wineskins which we filled were new, and see, they are torn. And these our garments and our sandals have become old because of the very long journey. And the men of Israel took some of their food, but they did not ask at the mouth of Yehovah. Okay, so now these people are coming to them. We've got this stuff. Okay, we made it all fresh, but it's a bit dry and it's a bit crumbly. Men of Israel were quite happy. We'll take some of your food. But they didn't ask Yehovah about it. Yehoshua made peace with them and made a covenant with them to let them live. Okay, it probably seemed like the right thing to do, didn't it? There's all these people who come to them with food, and they're like, we've come to make a covenant with you. It probably seemed like the right thing to do, to go, oh, go on then. We were told to destroy you, but probably a bit awkward to do that when you've arrived with all of this food. We'll make a covenant. Judges 2, 1 to 3. And the angel of Yehovah came up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I led you up from Mitzrayim and brought you to the land of which I swore to your fathers. And I said, I do not break my covenant with you. And as for you, do not make a covenant with the inhabitants of this land. Break down their altars, but you have not obeyed my voice. What is this that you have done? Therefore, I also said, I am not driving them out before you, and they shall be adversaries to you, and their gods shall be a snare to you. And I don't mean to mislead anyone into thinking that this is a direct response to what's happened. This is in response to another incident where they make covenants, but it's the same thing that they were doing. 2 Samuel 21, 1 to 6. And there was a scarcity of food in the days of David for 3 years, year after year. And David sought the face of Yehovah, and Yehovah answered, because of Shaul and his bloodthirsty house, because he killed the Gibeonites. They're the people that they were making a covenant with in Joshua. Yehovah now says there's this famine in the land because Shaul killed those Gibeonites, the ones that you were to kill originally, because Shaul killed them, because he's treated them in this way after you've made a covenant of peace with them. Now there is a famine in the land. The king therefore called the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not of the children of Israel, but of the remnant of the Amorites. Okay, so these people were Nephilim or giants. And the children of Israel had sworn protection to them, but Shaul had sought to kill them in his ardor or his zeal for the children of Israel and Yehudah. So David said to the Gibeonites, what should I do to you? And with what do I make atonement so that you bless the inheritance of Yehovah? So Yehovah's problem is that the children of Israel had sworn protection to them. Okay, they'd made the covenant of peace with them, and then Shaul would come along and he'd destroyed them. They were supposed to be destroyed in the first place, but now things are different. And the Gibeonites said to him, it is no matter of silver or gold between us and Shaul or his house. Neither is it for us to put to death any man in Israel. And he said, whatever you say, I do. I do you. And they said to the king, the man who consumed us and plotted against us, that we should be destroyed from remaining in all the border of Israel. Let 7 men of his sons be given to us, and we shall hang them before Yehovah in Gibeah of Shaul, whom Yehovah chose. And the king said, I give them. So in order for this to be put right, this is how these people ended up being a snare to them. In the end, Israel ends up being cursed because they let them dwell there with the covenant of peace, and then they tried to destroy them afterwards, which was wrong in Yehovah's eyes. Verse 19 says, when you besiege a city for a long time by fighting against it to take it, you do not destroy its trees by wielding an axe against them. If you do eat of them, do not cut them down. For is the tree of the field a man to be besieged by you? Only the trees which you know are not trees for food, you do destroy and cut down to build siege works against the city that is fighting against you until it falls. So I can't explain this, but I know that when they go into the land, Yehovah wants them to treat the fruit of the tree in a certain way for 3 years as if it's unclean to them. And then in the 4th year, it's to be holy to Yehovah. Here he says, if it's a tree that yields food, then you're not to cut it down. You know, are you going to treat it like a man who is besieged by you? He says only the ones that are not used for food. They're the only trees of the land which you can cut down to make these siege works. When anyone is found slain, lying in the field in the land which Yehovah your Elohim is giving you to possess, and it is not known who smote him. Okay, so if man sheds man's blood, by man his blood is shed. That's the rule. But if in this case you don't know who shed the blood, then your elders and your judges go out, and they shall measure the distance from the slain man to the cities round about. And it shall be that the elders of the city nearest to the slain man shall take a heifer which has not been worked and is not pulled with the yoke. So will you find out which city is responsible for it? Because someone's got to be responsible for this. You find the heifer. Now this is an interesting one. It says, this heifer is not pulled the yoke. We saw when we looked at the red heifer that a heifer can be seen to have not pulled the yoke, but can also be one from which you've gotten milk. In this case, it says a heifer which has not been worked and which is not pulled with the yoke. The elders of that city shall bring the heifer down to a wadi with flowing water, which is neither plowed nor sown, and they shall break the heifer's neck there in the wadi. And the priests and the sons of Levi shall come near, for Yehovah your Elohim has chosen them to serve him and to bless in the name of Yehovah. And by their mouth every strike and every stroke is tried. Again, fallible men, not a bunch of infallible men. Let all the elders of that city nearest to the slain man wash their hands over the heifer whose neck was broken in the wadi. And they shall answer and say, our hands have not sinned, I have not shed this blood, nor have our eyes seen it. O Yehovah, forgive your people Yisrael, whom you have redeemed. Do not allow innocent blood in the midst of your people Yisrael, and the blood guilt shall be pardoned to them. Thus you shall purge the guilt of innocent blood from your midst when you do what is right in the eyes of Yehovah. And I find it very interesting to know whether or not they actually did any of this stuff, or whether or not life just continued in Israel and they were like, oh, what, don't we have to do something with a heifer if we find someone dead? Yeah, don't worry about it. It's just weird, isn't it? We don't do any of that stuff anymore. I wonder whether or not that was the reaction of the people. Shall we pray? Father, teach us to respect authority. Teach us what it is to follow things that don't make sense to us because you've said them. I pray, Father, that we'd all be humble enough to read your word and to take it at face value, and whether we understand the things that you're asking or not, we would do them out of obedience. I pray for anybody who's listening to this who finds it difficult, who has issues of pride in their heart, or anything that is within them that is displeasing to you, anything that's in any of us that is displeasing to you. I pray, Father, that you would help us to work it out and to remove it from our characters so that we could be like you. We wish to be conformed to the image of your Son. And thank you for sending Yeshua. Just pray, Father, that we would hear what it is that he's been saying, what it is that you've been saying from the beginning. Thank you for showing us the way, the truth, and the life, and the way to be where it is that you are. I pray that we would walk worthy of that calling. Thank you, Father. Amen.